In this episode, I want to lay out the core principles of actualized.org. What are we doing here at the biggest picture level? What is my style of personal development? If we think of actualized.org as a school or as a teaching or as a style or as a philosophy, as a system, then what are the core tenets of this system? I wanted to lay those out for you. It can be very useful to be able to zoom out from all the individual stuff that we talk about. You know, sometimes I'll spend an hour or two or three talking about some very narrow topic, which is important, but that's only covering like maybe one principle out of many, many principles. So here we're going to talk about close to 65 different principles for creating the good life. This is what I feel is necessary for a human being to live a good life. Now, of course, this is informed by my life experience and my own biases, my own perspective, my own experiences in life, and my own style. So in an important sense, there's a sort of a stylistic component to any teacher that you're going to be learning from. Any spiritual teaching, any philosophical system, any political theory, there's a sort of just like a idiosyncratic style that comes along with it. So you have to also determine for yourself whether this style is going to resonate with you. Now, even if it doesn't fully resonate with you, you can still learn stuff from it. So it's not like you should only listen to teachers or teachings that are fully aligned with your style, but do recognize that, of course, the things I say come from certain biases and experiences that I have, and that doesn't mean that they're absolutely true for everybody. But at the same time, I must say that some of these principles are such rock-solid principles that I'm very tempted to say that they should be true for a large percentage of human beings. So it's not just purely style. There's a lot of profound wisdom in these principles. Now, it can take years to be able to fully implement one of these principles. Sometimes these principles sound very simple, just they can be stated in one or two sentences, but to really be able to embody it and to have this principle functioning in your life, and even just to be able to understand why this principle is so important, can take years, can take decades, which is why I have a lot of individual episodes devoted to each one of these in many cases. Not all of them. In the future, I'll be releasing more to make sure I cover as much of these principles as I can in a lot of depth, because we can't go into a lot of depth here, because here we just have to kind of like list them all out and give you a big picture perspective. Now, I'm not going to go into explaining why each of these principles is true. That would be way too much work and way too much detail for this overview that we're doing here. But if you're curious about why these principles are true and you want me to like prove it to you, well, first of all, I'm not going to prove anything to you. That's your job, is to figure out what actually works in life and what doesn't. I'm just offering these as suggestions, not as dogma, not as beliefs that you take blindly. But ultimately, why they're true, how do I know that they're true? It's because of all of my life experience, all of my experience doing business, all of my experience trying to figure out my own life, dealing with my own neuroses and problems and sticking points, my own pathologies, all of the enormous research that I've done, theoretical research, reading hundreds of books, studying with advanced teachers and enlightened masters, traveling around the country, traveling around the world to various places to learn, studying hundreds of different perspectives, literally hundreds of different perspectives, hundreds of different traditions, from Eastern ones to Western ones, from modern ones to ancient ones, reading lots of self-help books, trying to experiment with all these techniques myself and seeing what works, what doesn't work, what's important, what's not so important, right? So from all of this and all of my meditating and contemplating and journaling and thinking about this and all of my 5 years of teaching all of this and getting feedback from people and coaching people professionally, as I used to do, working with clients one-on-one, seeing what their sticking points are, talking with friends around the country about what their various sticking points are, working on improving various limitations in my own life, like my health and my nutrition and my fitness and my inability to socialize when I was younger and my introversion, my shyness. So working through all of this stuff, right? All of it is sort of getting compiled together and is informing my understanding of reality and what's important to live the good life. And of course, very importantly, I forgot to mention my pretty deep experience with psychedelics at this point has been very instrumental in informing me about what the most important principles for living a good life are. And this is something that I've really been interested in for probably close to 20 years, all the way back to high school. I was just interested in what are the principles of living a good life. So without further ado, let's get into these principles. Core principle number one, and I'm not going to list them in any particular order here, but this one is so important. Maybe it does deserve to be number one, is no ideology and no dogma of any kind. This is one of the things that makes Actualize.org unique among many other teachings and schools, is that most teachings and most schools are filled with a lot of ideology and a lot of dogma, stuff that they just want you to accept. And I have a whole episode called How Ideology Works, which goes into a lot of depth about the dangers of ideology and the dangers of dogma. Do not make the mistake of thinking that ideology and dogma is just a mistake that religious people make. No, no, no. This is a mistake that almost everybody makes. Scientific people make this mistake. Atheists make this mistake. Skeptics make this mistake. Political people make this mistake. Very intelligent people make this mistake. It's very easy to fall into some kind of ideology because that's what society feeds you, is various kinds of ideologies. And one of the most difficult things to do in life is to question and undo all the ideologies and dogmas that you've been filled with growing up in whatever culture you grew up in, whatever family you grew up in, whatever school system you went to. You know, they all filled your mind with various kinds of programming and beliefs and ideologies. And so questioning and undoing all of that and living a dogma-free, ideology-free life, that is very challenging. And it can be a little difficult to understand why that's even important. But the reason that it is because the thing you're ultimately after is you're after the highest truth, and you're after freedom of your mind. And so the problem with ideology and dogma is that it sort of anchors your mind down, and it doesn't allow your mind to explore all the nooks and crannies of reality that it needs to be able to explore to understand what reality is and to live the good life. You see, these ideologies are like grooves that your mind gets stuck in, and then it keeps going down these grooves. It keeps thinking down these grooves and looking at the world through these lenses. And that shapes and distorts what you're able to see and how flexible you're able to be and how you're able to change your life. People who are very ideological and dogmatic, they're not actually able to change themselves, which is what we need to do. We need to massively change ourselves in order to create the good life. And all of my research and philosophizing into the topic of epistemology, or the theory of knowledge, if I could boil all of that down to just one simple principle, it would just be, do not be ideological. It's just that simple. That's a very, very simple principle. And this grounds pretty much everything that I ever talk about ever in any of my content. And I stress this over and over and over again because it's so important. And it'll take you years to realize how important this is. But if you can follow this one principle in your life, this will save you a lot of misery and trouble. And a lot of going down dead ends and various kinds of ideological traps. The next core principle is that big picture thinking is greater than technical knowledge and always trumps technical knowledge. That's another thing that I stress in my work all the time, is big picture thinking. Do you understand what's really going on at the highest possible levels? And are you concerned about that over all the technical details. That's like one of my greatest strengths is big picture thinking. The technical details of things, I'm not really that good at. That's actually sort of a weakness of mine. And sometimes when I'm delivering some piece of content or I'm talking about some topic, it's in the technical details that I can screw up, I can get something wrong here or there. I've certainly done that plenty of times in past episodes. But I'm never too concerned about that because my focus is always on the big picture. And that's because what I saw when I was younger is I saw the opposite of that. I saw everybody around me, including my teachers and society and culture at large and my professors and so forth, they were so focused on the technical knowledge, and yet they had very little of the big picture. And because of this, they were living the wrong kinds of lives. See, you can have all the perfect technical knowledge, you can be an expert in your technical field, but have no idea of the big picture. And your life will be miserable and highly dysfunctional and pathological. Whereas if you get the big picture right and you're focused on nailing the big picture, the technical details, you don't need to waste a lot of time, energy on that. It doesn't matter. And if you get a few technical details wrong here or there, it doesn't really matter. So the big picture, like in this example with this episode, is we're gonna give you all these 65 principles for creating the good life. That's a very big picture. So if you just follow these principles intelligently, not robotically, then you should make very good progress to creating a great life. And notice that these principles, they don't depend on technical knowledge. We're talking about very broad ideas here. The next core principle is that direct experience is king. Direct experience is king. Experience is really the only thing that exists and the only thing that is real. Right now, your experience, whatever you're experiencing right now, that's what's real, that's what's actual, that's what exists. Everything else is fantasy. Everything else is imagination. This is a very powerful principle for cutting through all the bullshit that culture and society and people feed you. And also for cutting through your own bullshit, the bullshit that your own mind feeds you, your own imaginings and musings and theories and philosophies and ideologies. How do you cut through all that? By grounding yourself in your present direct experience. That's what's king. If it's not present in your direct experience, it's not real. That's very powerful. And you need to use this principle over and over again as you're inquiring into reality to help you to sort the wheat from the chaff, to sort the actuality from all the concepts and beliefs that you will be learning from books and so forth and coming up in your own mind. The next core principle is self-experimentation. Actualize.org is all about self-experimentation. How do you discover what really works, what is true, and which principles will lead to the good life? By believing me? By reading a book? By listening to some PhD professor who has a Nobel Prize and trusting him? Or some guru who's sitting up on a pedestal? No. It's through self-experimentation. You won't know what techniques will or won't work for you, or will or won't resonate with you until you try them. And this principle really is a corollary of the idea that direct experience is king. So it's because we realize that direct experience is king that we also realize that we need to do a lot of self-experimentation, because it's only by going out and experiencing different things, trying different techniques, that we will discover what really works for us. So what this means is if you have some kind of problem, let's say you have a consistent relationship problem in your intimate relationships, So self-experimentation, this principle, what it means is that you're going to go out there and you're going to experiment with various solutions. You're not going to come and trust me or somebody else or try to get the answer from someplace. You're going to experiment. Now, of course, this means you can listen to people, you can get advice from people, you can read books, of course, and you should. But self-experimentation means that your approach to solving any problem is always going to be one of, okay, let me experiment and troubleshoot this and try different things until something works. So you're going to go maybe read some books on relationships. Maybe you're going to go hire a therapist and talk to them. Maybe you're going to go see a life coach. Maybe you're going to go do some psychedelics and contemplate the nature of your relationship and your sticking points while you're on psychedelics. Or maybe you're going to do some journaling. Or maybe you're going to have a serious one-to-one conversation with your loved one or your spouse or whatever to try to resolve this relationship thing. Or maybe you're going to go do a solo retreat in the woods for a week and contemplate the nature of your relationship. So all of these are different things you can experiment with. And then your approach is going to be, okay, let me try this stuff out and see what's going to solve it. And if you have money problems, same thing. You're going to try various self-experiments to resolve your money problems. And if you have some depression, you're going to do more self-experimentation and so forth. And this is how basically you solve all of your problems in life, is through self-experimentation. The next core principle is radical open-mindedness. I've talked a lot about this in the past. I have entire episodes about open-mindedness, and I'll have some more in the future. But the reason radical open-mindedness is so important is because we recognize that we enter this world not knowing anything. And that we need to be able to fully explore every nook and cranny of reality without prejudging it, so that we don't accidentally cut ourselves off from great discoveries and amazing insights and truths. See? And we also recognize that the mind, the ego mind, tends to love to be closed-minded to new experiences and to challenging new ideas. And so therefore, we take the opposite step, the counterintuitive move, and we open ourselves up radically, so radically that it would shock most people that we're this open. This means you have to be open to any idea, any perspective, any teaching, no matter how ridiculous or crazy and untrue it might sound at first. This might seem dangerous, but actually it's the opposite. Open-mindedness doesn't mean that you are going to believe a bunch of ridiculous things. It just means that you're open to exploring different ideas and perspectives. And the reason that we accept this principle and we follow it is because we recognize that if we're not radically open-minded, then our mind is going to judge prematurely and cut us off from all these other avenues that we can explore. And we also recognize that a lot of the deepest truths in life are counterintuitive and seem ridiculous and silly on the surface until they are deeply explored. And it can take a lot of time to deeply explore these various truths and topics before we realize just how true and powerful they are, which means that we need to remain open-minded during that time. Otherwise, if we're closed-minded, then what's going to happen is that we're just going to say, oh, well, that thing is stupid, that thing is crazy, that can't possibly be true, that thing is irrational, that thing is silly and religious, and that thing is criminal, and we're going to do all this, but we're not actually going to explore all of that. It's much better to go and actually explore all of that, which again is not the same thing as becoming dogmatic about any one of those things or clinging to any one of those things. We're interested in exploration, genuine exploration. Exploration means you don't know what you're going to find. Sometimes you'll find great stuff, sometimes you'll find ugly, bad stuff. The next core principle is that you do not judge things which you have not experienced personally. This, again, is sort of a corollary to the radical open-mindedness principle, but it bears making explicit here because I can't tell you how many times I've fallen into this trap of judging things that I hadn't personally experienced and talking about it as though I knew about it and I understood it, but really that was just a self-deception, and I didn't really understand it because I didn't have any experience with the thing. And this is something that the mind loves to do all the time. It loves to judge things, especially when it has zero experience with it. So maybe you judge Middle Easterners or Middle Eastern countries. But the question is, have you actually been to a Middle Eastern country? How many Middle Easterner friends do you have? Or maybe you judge psychedelics. Have you ever even done psychedelics? See? But of course, the mind is very tricky. So the mind will say, oh, Leo, but I don't need to do that. I don't need to go to Middle Eastern countries. I don't need to do psychedelics. I don't need to try that food. I don't need to explore that culture. I don't need to study this religion because I already know it's bullshit. That line of reasoning itself is the bullshit. So be very careful about judging things you have not experienced. You need to become very good at recognizing when your mind is about to judge something, and then you ask yourself, wait a minute, have I actually experienced this thing that I'm going to be talking about here in a second? Oh, I haven't? Then I should keep my mouth shut, and I keep my mind open. That's a very powerful skill to develop. Very few people have developed that skill, and I still struggle with that one myself. The next core principle is question everything. Question everything. There is no idea too sacred not to question. In fact, anything that is sacred needs to be questioned even more so, doubly so, triply so. Question especially the most obvious stuff, the stuff that people would think that you're crazy or insane to question. Question that. Question whether the world even exists. Question whether you even exist. Question everything. The more fundamental you're questioning, the better. And especially become very good at questioning assumptions. What are the assumptions of this philosophical system? What are the assumptions of this scientific model? What are the assumptions of this spiritual teacher? You have to get very, very good at sussing out assumptions and questioning them. And of course, questioning all of your own assumptions and all of your own ideas. So you don't just question skeptically on the outside, you also question even more so on the inside. Question every teaching. Question everything I say. But of course, be careful not to turn this into a weapon where you're just questioning and you're putting the burden of understanding on others, the burden of proving things on others. You need to question in a way where you still assume the burden and responsibility of finding the truth for yourself. The next core principle is care about philosophical and metaphysical matters. Most people do not care about these because they think that there's no practical application. There is, it's just that philosophical and metaphysical matters are more abstract, and therefore it takes more effort and more study to find the applications. There are very practical applications, but it takes a little bit more work. If you fail to follow this principle, what's going to happen is that you're going to get lost in the transactional, pragmatic nature of mundane everyday life, of business, of doing chores. And you're going to get so lost in that, and there's really no soul or spirit to be found there. There's nothing deep or profound to be found in just doing business, just earning money, just being transactional in your relationships. The depth in life is found in having philosophical and metaphysical matters questioned and resolved. That's where the really juicy and powerful work lies. So you need to care about that. You need to cultivate a certain curiosity, a philosophical and metaphysical curiosity, which means that you're not just chasing practical self-help advice, like how to get laid, how to earn $1 million, how to cure my depression. All of that, it's fine to a certain degree, but you need to go way beyond that, something deeper. And you'll notice that that's one of the things that differentiates actualize.org from a lot of the other self-help material that's out there, is that most of it tends to be just very, very strictly transactional and pragmatic about how to get you a particular specific result. And while that's sort of appealing on the surface, it's hollow on the inside. It doesn't go deep enough into addressing your root issues in life, because most of your surface level issues stem from your deeper existential metaphysical problems that you're not even aware of yet. The next core principle is genuine intent for truth at whatever cost. You need to genuinely care about the truth with a capital T as one of your highest priorities and values, no matter what the cost is to get at this truth. It doesn't matter if you need to move to a different city, break up with all of your friends, pay tens of thousands of dollars, work overtime, whatever you got to do. If that's what's required to get at the truth, then that's what's required. And you're going to accept that cost because you have a genuine intent and desire and curiosity for the ultimate truth. Without this, what's going to happen is that you're going to keep falling into falsehood and delusion. You see? Because if you're not willing to accept the costs that come with seeking the ultimate truth, you're going to get sucked into the lesser things in life. You're going to pursue money and sex and comfort and luxury and these sorts of things. And all of that is best pursued with falsehood. See, and you're going to end up deluding yourself very deeply in life. You're not going to really understand what life is at the highest level because you never made it a genuine intent. Your priorities instead were chasing material stuff, which has nothing to do with truth and often is actually aligned with falsehood. Oftentimes, the easiest way to make money is through falsehood, not through truth. The easiest way to attract a sexual partner oftentimes is through falsehood, not through truth. The next core principle is you need to have a genuine intent to understand every point of view. One thing you notice about life is that there are so many different kinds of points of view. People have all kinds of points of view, different groups of people, different cultures and nations and ethnicities have all sorts of different points of view. And usually what the average person does is they just stay in their point of view and then they criticize and judge the other points of view without genuinely caring to look at the world from the perspective of all those other people. And you need to do the opposite of that. You need to get very curious and good at jumping into other people's shoes and looking at the world from their perspective. And that's because you recognize that the world really is nothing but different points of view. There's no such thing as a understanding of the world without a point of view. And your own point of view is not the most important or the best. You recognize that. So when you recognize that, you understand that, hey, I can learn a lot from looking at the world from many points of view. And that's one of the things that you become passionate about, is exploring different points of view. The next core principle is integral thinking. You need to think integrally. And what that really boils down to is the realization that every point of view or perspective contains some kernel of truth, no matter what it is. Even some of the most atrocious perspectives, Nazism, radical Islamic terrorism, and others that you would think have no redeeming qualities, you can find a kernel of truth even in those points of view, and less radical ones especially. And so this is where open-mindedness comes in, right? You need to be able to integrate all these different points of view and bring them all together and to see, okay, what's really going on here? What's sort of the meta perspective, the meta point of view when we combine all these other points of view? What does that tell us about life? What does that tell me about myself? What does that tell us about humanity? What does it tell us about society? And so forth. And from that, you get so much more. than just sticking to your own points of view and defending your own points of view. This is really the opposite of ideology and dogma. Because what ideology and dogma try to do is they try to limit your point of view and defend a rigid perspective on the world. So it's the opposite of integral, the opposite of holistic. And therefore, people with this limited perspective, they understand so much less of life than they otherwise could. And so I want you to keep this core principle in mind, that every point of view contains some truth, and it's your job to discover what that is. It's not the responsibility of the other person to tell you or convince you of that kernel of truth. For example, it's not the job of a Nazi or a radical terrorist to convince you of their truth. It's your job to go study them and discover what is the truth that they are so passionate about. What is that? And very importantly, just because you're doing this does not mean that you have to become a Nazi, of course, or a terrorist. Of course not. You're exploring points of view. You're going to be exploring hundreds of points of view throughout your whole life. That doesn't mean that you have to get married to any one point of view. In fact, integral thinking is the recognition that every point of view is partial, never the ultimate truth, always partial. So that's why we're exploring so many of them, is precisely because it's just a little piece. Think of every point of view as like a 1% perspective on reality. So 1% is not a lot. So, we need to explore hundreds of them for all those individual ones to add up to something substantial. The next core principle is that everything basically boils down to inner game. The quality of your life boils down to your psychology. This means that all problems and all suffering is self-created and self-inflicted. And this is very difficult for many people to believe, because it runs counter to the idea that we are living in some sort of rigid, fixed external reality, a material reality with unbreakable physical laws, where it seems like all the problems are out there in the world and all the suffering is created by the world outside of me, and that I have nothing to do with it. So this is flipping that on its head, upside down, 180 degrees, and realizing that actually all of those external problems that I think exists out there, all the suffering that's created by the world, all of that external, material, physical, hard stuff that can't be changed, what is that but actually an aspect of my own inner game? That's actually a belief that I have. That's a paradigm that I'm in. And that itself is not an outer thing, but an inner thing. This is like the master key that unlocks all of your potential in life, because it's only when you realize that the most important thing for determining the quality of your life and everything you do and solving all of your problems and suffering is mastering the internal software of your mind. When you realize that, now you have so much power. Now there's all this potential that opens up. Now you're no longer a victim. Whereas in the other case, there's very little you can do. You get stuck very easily. The next core principle is lifelong learning and self-education. You need to become a lifelong learner. You need to become passionate about learning. And your education, you've got to take full responsibility for it and take ownership of it and be proactive about it. Don't wait for a teacher to get you to do some homework assignment or to read a book. Don't wait for some program or some training to teach you something. Go out there and proactively learn about life. And the reason this principle is so paramount is because when you're born, you have no information about the world. You don't know how the world works or what it is or what you're doing here. So you got to start to learn. And this process of learning will continue for the rest of your life. It's not just school. It's not just university. In fact, all of that was just the beginning of your entire educational career, which only really takes off after you graduate university. So, of course, this means reading lots of books. You should expect to read 100 or 200 books over the next 5 or 10 years. This is going to be absolutely essential. It's through these books that you will learn various perspectives, techniques, traps, mistakes, lessons, principles. You'll be exposed to new ideas, to new cultures, to history, to things you haven't ever heard about anywhere else. The quality and detail of information that's presented in books, a quality book, will be much greater than what you see in a video or on television or on some social media website. And you need that. You need that solid, high quality, reliable information to get you started. These are like your leads. These books are the source of leads for you as to what you should be pursuing and what techniques can work for you and so forth. And these books help you to understand what your problems are. See, part of the challenge is that you have problems that you don't even understand you have yet. It takes a lot of reading just to realize that. But also, don't stop at books. You also need to take courses, seminars, workshops. There are many online courses that are available these days on almost any topic that you would want to learn about. You can find in-person seminars and workshops, which are super important to go to. There's a very big difference between watching a workshop or a seminar online in video form and actually going to one live in person. You'll get 10 times more from going to the exact same workshop or seminar live rather than watching it as a video. Do not be cheap with your self-education. It's because you recognize that this principle is so important, lifelong learning, that you are willing to invest in your learning. You're willing to pay hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars for courses, seminars, workshops. You're willing to invest $500 to $1,000 every year in buying a bunch of new books. And an additional point about this lifelong learning, we're still talking about just this one principle of lifelong learning, is you need to develop a system for taking notes and for organizing all of this stuff that you're going to be researching and learning. Because you're going to have various techniques and ideas and principles that you're learning, vocabulary words, all of this, and you're going to have to compile it together in some way, a system. If you want an idea for how to do that, check out my episode about how to keep a commonplace book. That's my system that I use. The next core principle is observation. Observation is one of the keys to life. The essence of learning is observation. How do you learn anything? By observing it for a long period of time, very patiently, very methodically, over and over and over again. The power of observation is enormous, way more than anyone would ever imagine, which is why you can spend years and decades doing very careful and painstaking observation. And observation is the solution to the problem of ideology and dogma and various kinds of belief systems that you get trapped in. Observation is the antidote to being lost inside your own mind. What you need to do is to observe. And that's why science, to the extent that science is successful and has some good benefits for society, is because science focuses on observation. But now you need to take that on as a principle for yourself. It's not enough to have science observe for you and then to report the results to you. You need to become a keen observer of life and of reality. Observe everything. Observe people. Observe animals. Observe nature. Observe trees. Observe your own behaviors. Observe your own thinking process. Observe your motivations, your fears. Observe your problems and neuroses. Observe when you suffer. Observe when you're in pain. Observe when you're happy. Observe what makes you motivated. Observe what makes you depressed. Carefully observe all of that, and through this process you will learn about yourself, you will learn about the world, you will learn about mankind, you will learn about business, anything. Anything you observe, you will make finer grained distinctions in, and you will learn how that thing works. So, observation is related, of course, to our earlier principle of direct experience as king. Observation goes hand in hand with direct experience. And the opposite of that is believing what other people tell you. So, to really be able to embody the things that I teach with actualize.org, you need to do an enormous amount of observation, years of observation on everything that I talk about. So the things I talk about in the episode, then you got to go and actually observe it in your own life and see that, oh yes, this is exactly how it works. Or maybe you'll realize, no, it's not quite how Leo said it works. Maybe he was only half right, but the other half, I've observed that it works differently than what he said. See? And that can happen because, you know what, my observation is not perfect by any means. There's so much to observe about so many different facets of reality that it's hard to observe 100% of all of it. So you're bound to, if you're going to be seriously observing, observe some things about the things I talk about that I was not able to observe. And it's through observation that insights come. The next closely related principle is plan to meditate for 1 hour every day for the rest of your life. Do you have a meditation practice yet? Why not? How many times have I told you that meditation is one of the most important things you can do for your personal development? It's a cornerstone habit. You need to install this habit. Don't start with an hour, start with 10, 20 minutes, whatever you can, but eventually you got to build up, and you should already have the expectations in place that you're going to be meditating for 1 hour every day for the rest of your life. This is not negotiable. You're just going to do it and you're going to enjoy it. It'll take you a while before you start to enjoy it, but you should already be envisioning that you're going to be enjoying it. Now, why meditation? Well, because meditation is really just observation. When you're meditating, you're just sitting there and you're observing the present moment. And again, that ties us back to the earlier principle of direct experience is king. What is meditation? It's just pure direct experience of whatever is happening in the present moment. That's all that it is. And you're just observing. And you're observing the function of your own mind, various body sensations and emotions that you're having. And it's only through this observation process, through meditation, that you're going to be able to understand yourself and how your body and mind work. Through years of careful and painstaking observation. And this is why most spiritual teachings cannot be directly related to people, and why you can't sell spiritual advancement, and you can't sell psychological maturity, and you can't sell wisdom. You can't sell these things to people because the only way they can get those things is by doing the observational work that's required to have those insights and understandings, to have that base of experience. You see, it's like no amount of money could you give me to be able to make you into like a master piano player. The only way you can become a master piano player is by going through all the direct experience and practice and observation that a master piano player has. That makes him a master. And so now apply this, though, to your body and your mind and your life. No amount of listening to me or paying me any amount of money will get you the experience, the observational experience that you need to understand the functioning of your own mind and body. This is absolutely critical. This is why spiritual growth is so difficult, because most people just don't do the observation work. It takes a lot of time and energy, and it's difficult, and it's boring, and sometimes it's painful, and you suffer through it. And sometimes you observe things which freak you out. You observe things about reality which run counter to all your ideologies and beliefs and all the programming you got when you were younger. And that freaks you out. And then when you become really good at meditation, that enables you to access mystical states, higher states of consciousness, non-ordinary states of consciousness, which is where all the really powerful gains lie, and which is absolutely essential for developing a good life. But it takes years to get there, years of practice to get there for most people. The next core principle is that ego is the root of all human problems and suffering. And ego is just that sense of you. Ego is the sense that you were born as that human being right there. and that you will die one day. That, your identity with that biological body and mind that you have, and your personal story about the fact that you were born, you went to school, and you had all these problems, and now here you are sitting there as this material creature, that's ego. And from that stem all human problems and suffering, both individual and collective. This is a super powerful principle. This one principle basically explains all of yourself and all of mankind. And there's so much to be said about this, and I have said quite a lot about it throughout many episodes in the past. And basically every episode I talk about touches upon this principle in one form or another. The next principle, which is closely related, is self-deception. Self-deception is the biggest thing you need to be worried about in life. How your own mind lies to you and tricks you and deceives you. The ego mind corrupts everything that it comes in contact with. And even more so than you lie to others and that you deceive others, you deceive yourself. And I have a whole 3-part episode series called Self-Deception, where I list many self-deception mechanisms that I've been studying over the last 5 or 10 years. It's how your own mind tricks you. You need to get very, very, very good at seeing your own self-deceptions. Not so much the self-deceptions of others, but of yourself. Because, you see, if we're trying to get to the truth, if we're trying to really understand reality at a big picture level, that means that we have to contend with the biggest obstacle, which is self-deception. Because self-deception leads to delusion and to falsehood. See, so that's your greatest obstacle, is your own mind. And of course, this connects with the earlier principle of that inner game is the most important thing for solving all of your problems. Because all of your problems basically stem from various kinds of self-deceptions that are running inside of your mind, which you aren't conscious of yet. The next closely related principle is self-bias. You need to recognize and be able to see within yourself your own selfishness and your own self-biases. You need to see how your ego mind, or the self, lowercase s self, distorts everything that it perceives, because the whole purpose of the self is to survive. And therefore, you're always going to be looking and interacting with situations and manipulating situations in such a way that it's going to serve yourself. And therefore, your perceptual system is self-biased, filled with conflicts of interest and double standards. So a very simple example of self-bias is that, you know, if I'm a criminal and like I robbed a grocery store, I can't be allowed to be my own judge and jury at the trial, because I would have a self-bias of setting myself free. I would create all sorts of justifications and excuses for why I didn't commit the crime. See? Which is why judges have to recuse themselves if they have any kind of material connection with the case that they're trying. Because otherwise self-bias is going to creep in there. But of course, this is just one little tip of the iceberg of how self-bias works. These are some gross examples. There are very subtle examples of how self-bias works. Basically, all of your ideologies and beliefs and everything you perceive out there is always biased by your own needs, your egoic needs, your survival needs. So your relationships are self-biased, your business is self-biased, your attitudes politically are self-biased, and so on and so forth. And all of this is preventing you from being able to access the truth, which you need to live the good life. So you need to unwire all of those self-biases, or at the very least become very conscious of them. The next core principle is that all fear, all judgment, all evil, all anger, and all suffering are delusion and falsehood. This is huge. This is a huge principle which will save you so much suffering. All fear, judgment, evil, anger, and suffering is delusion. That means anytime you're experiencing those, and of course you don't enjoy experiencing those, and you want a way to not experience those anymore, well, you start to have to become more conscious and realize just how much all of that is falsehood, and it stems from falsehood. So the reason that we want to pursue truth so much, aside from the fact that we're just genuinely curious about it, but it's also because if we do discover the truth, then we will realize that fear, judgment, evil, anger, and suffering have all been false. And that's precisely what we need to live the good life. You can't live the good life while you're in fear, while you're judging all the time, while you see evil out there in the world, while you're angry, and while you're suffering. By definition, that's the bad life. So the bad life goes with falsehood, and the good life goes with truth. Another closely related principle here is do not demonize anyone. All demonization is delusion as well. Anytime you think somebody out there is evil, you're wrong. This is one of the self-deception mechanisms of the mind, is to try to demonize others or groups of people or entities or organizations. Somewhat of a related principle is that reality is perfect. There is nothing at all wrong with reality. If you think that something is wrong in the world, it's because of your inner game and how you're looking at it, not because it actually is wrong or it actually is bad or it actually is evil. Reality is literally perfect, but you can only appreciate that, and it will only start sounding like something that's real and not just woo-woo wishful thinking at enormously high levels of consciousness. So it'll take you years and perhaps decades to have enough mystical experiences to ultimately realize that reality is perfect. Until then, well, you're sort of just going to have to take my word for it. But this is a powerful principle because you can use it to change and grow yourself. So anytime in your life that you're finding something that is bothering you or annoying you and you think it should be otherwise and that this is wrong or that person's doing something wrong, you can always remind yourself, wait a minute, but I know in the back of my mind that reality is perfect. Maybe I haven't had the mystical experience yet to experience that, like Leo says, but I can intuit something about that. And so maybe there's something wrong with me, the way that I'm looking at this situation, the way I'm looking at this person. How am I creating the imperfection out of the perfection that's already there? It's a powerful principle that you can use to change your feelings about things. Now, the next 4 principles that I'm going to give you are very important ones, and there are going to be 4 different ways of looking at the purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? So, the purpose of life, there's a lot we could say about this, and I've said stuff in the past about it, but basically, here are 4 different purposes of life. These are very overarching, big picture purposes which help to orient you as to what you should be doing in your life. So, the first purpose of life is to raise your consciousness. That should be something that you're concerned with every single day of your life from now on. The second purpose of life is to raise your capacity to love. To embrace the full spectrum of experience, not just the good experiences and the sweet and pleasant ones, but everything. Raise your capacity to love everything and everyone. The third purpose of life is to take in the beauty of life. Have you noticed how beautiful it all is? But of course, there's also a spectrum of beauty. And it's very easy to see the beauty when you go to a museum and you look at a fine Picasso painting, or you go to some national park like Yosemite and you look at the beautiful mountains and trees and the sunset, and that's beautiful. That's the kind of beauty that's sort of easy to see. But can you see the beauty of everyday life, of the most mundane things? Can you see the beauty of your body, of your hands? Can you see the beauty on the wall? Can you see the beauty of that pencil, of that lamp, of the carpet, of this room, the beauty of society, the beauty of mankind, the beauty of even the ugly things? That really is, if you think about it, the essence of a good life. To live the greatest life possible is really just none other than to see beauty everywhere all the time and to be conscious of that. But you have to train yourself because society has trained you to be judgmental and to pick and choose and to not like the ugly stuff and to only like 1% of the full spectrum of all the stuff that there is to love. That requires surrendering your ego. See, the ego doesn't want to love and see the beauty of everything. It wants to cherry pick. And so your job is to surrender that more and more and more and to take in more of the beauty all the time, so that you don't have a day where you go by in your life where you're just going through the motions, just going to work, just punching the clock, just earning some money, just doing some business, just taking care of the kids, just cooking a meal, but you're disconnected from the beauty of it all. And that's what very careful observation and meditation will ultimately teach you, is they will teach you the beauty of the most simple things. Just like looking at your hands and seeing the enormous beauty in the design of your hands and how they function. You know, you can sit there for hours marveling at this, but only after enormous training. That doesn't come to you from a diet of playing video games and watching Netflix for your whole life. You know, you're not going to be able to do that. It'll take years to untrain yourself from that Netflix video game diet to be able to see the beauty of very simple things. You know, the average person, when they're walking on the sidewalk and they see some dog poo, they can't see the beauty in that. And you need to train yourself to see the beauty in that. And whatever it takes that you need to surrender to see the beauty in that, that's your work. That's one of your highest purposes in life. You know, I was driving yesterday late at night, like I like to do. I drive around Las Vegas late at night, just looking at the lights and just contemplating and meditating while I drive. Actually, I love to meditate while I drive the most. And so I do this whole loop around Las Vegas. It takes about an hour and a half. It's probably like 80 miles or so. I drive around the entire city late at night. And I was driving, and then there was like some part on the road where I usually drive where there was like construction going on. And I got annoyed by that. I'm thinking like, oh, I got this peaceful drive and I have to deal with all this construction nonsense that's happening late at night. But then I also realized like, oh, wait a minute. Why am I not taking in the beauty of all of this? I mean, it's beautiful. Like the construction signs, there's certain beauty to them, and people working, you know, the way they're constructing this off-ramp or on-ramp or whatever it is. Like there's a certain beauty to that. And then you kind of just see that, oh, this is society. It's sort of like almost like ants working on the little ant colony, you know, building something on the road. And so like you see that beauty. Whereas normally I would get annoyed by that. Here I saw the beauty of it, and it completely transformed that experience. So you need to get good at doing that all the time in more and more difficult situations. You know, it's very difficult to see the beauty when you're dealing with a situation that is affecting your survival needs. So that's where most spiritual work happens, right there. And the fourth purpose of life is to feel alive every day, to live proactively, to not have a single day where you're just, like I said, going through some boring motions, just kind of doing another typical day, just kind of phoning it in and being robotic. To actually feel alive, that feeling of engagement. You want to be passionate and alive. So whatever that takes, if that takes you doing more travel, then do that. And if that requires you have a better job in order to finance your travel, then do that. But of course, to feel alive, also what that means is being more conscious, being less robotic and less mechanical in the way that you live. The next principle is to build your metaphysical connection to reality. I've talked about this explicitly in my video called What is Spirituality? So we can rephrase now this principle as just pursue spirituality or be spiritual. And what that means is developing your connection to reality, your metaphysical connection. And what that means is realizing that you're not just some creature, some mammalian meatbag who is living on this rock that's rotating around the sun, but rather that you are the entire universe. You're not an object that is within existence, you are existence itself. To realize that I am the whole universe as I stand here, that is only possible through all of the metaphysical contemplations and various meditations that I have done for many, many years. And that is starting to develop within me, and it's only going to develop more and more and more. And the more that happens, the better your life becomes, because now you feel like life is not just about living and surviving and doing chores for people, but it's really just about connecting more and more with yourself as the entire universe and being more conscious of that. The next core principle is counterintuitiveness. This is such a profound point and topic. I'll have a whole episode about it in the future. What it means is that reality is deeply counterintuitive. Almost every facet of anything worthwhile that you want to accomplish in life, you're going to notice the counterintuitiveness of it. That means that reality is going to work the opposite of how you think it will work until you get a lot of experience with it. So, for example, if you're a man trying to attract a woman, a beautiful woman, attracting a beautiful woman is very counterintuitive because you have to do the opposite of what you think you would have to do to attract her. You would think that you'd have to go up and brag to her and show off your big muscles and all of that. And counterintuitively, if you do that, you're actually going to repel her. And that takes a lot of experience to unlearn that naive intuition that you had and to learn how it really works. Another example is, for example, business. In business, to earn money and be successful, you have to do the opposite of what you would think. Like, for example, you might think in business, the best way to earn a bunch of money is just to market to everybody, as many eyeballs as possible. Make my message as most generic as possible so it appeals to absolutely everybody. But if you do that in business these days, what's going to happen is that actually you're going to fail. It's much better to narrow your niche and your focus and to only target your advertising and sales and your product to a very narrow, specific group of people, like less than 1% of the entire population. And you would think that, but Leo, that means I'm alienating 99% of people. Yes, but you're going to convert that other 1%. Whereas if you try to appeal to everybody, you're going to convert nobody. And that's just one of the many counterintuitive things that you'll discover in business. Relationships are also very counterintuitive. Happiness, the pursuit of happiness is counterintuitive. Fear is counterintuitive. Emotions are counterintuitive. Like I said, I mean, literally like every aspect of life is so counterintuitive. It works the opposite of what you would initially think how it would work. And so actually a corollary principle to this is, and this is a very powerful principle as almost stupid as it sounds, do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. I can't explain to you just how much leverage I've gotten out of following this one principle in my life. Sometimes I will literally just see what is the common thing people do, and I'll just do the opposite just based on this principle, purely on this principle. And the reason that is because I know that what most people are doing isn't making them happy, nor is it making them successful. What most people are doing is they're getting very mediocre results in all areas of life. And so if I do what they do, I expect I'll get mediocrity. So almost as a default, what I do is I just try to be a contrarian and do the opposite. Are most people meditating? No, so I'll meditate. Are most people taking psychedelics? No, so I'll take psychedelics. Are most people, working hard to discover their life purpose? No, so I'll do that. Now, of course, you can find exceptions to this, so I wouldn't recommend, applying this in a robotic way. Like, well, Leo, so by this logic, does it mean that most people aren't taking heroin, so I should take heroin? No, of course not. So you have to be intelligent in how you apply this principle. But generally speaking, it's because reality is so counterintuitive, it's pretty smart. After you realize how counterintuitive things are, the next time you go into a fresh situation, you almost start to expect that, well, I expect the situation should work like this, but I also know that reality is so fucking counterintuitive. And I've been burned so many times before by the counterintuitiveness of things. Let me just now do the opposite thing first and see if that works. And oftentimes it will work the first time. See, you learn that lesson. The next core principle is that non-duality is the ultimate truth. Reality is non-dual, which means that all boundaries, all categories, and all distinctions ultimately collapse. They're all relative. There is no distinction between inside, outside, physical, non-physical, me, other, good, bad, black, white, human, non-human, living, non-living, organic, inorganic, scientific versus religious. So all of these dualities, all of these will ultimately collapse. They don't hold if you follow them all the way. This is a super profound truth, and this one principle can help you to cut through so much bullshit and to see how the mind constructs all these categories and distinctions. Very, very helpful to see how most of the things you were taught as a child all the way up through university have just been categories that were constructed by the human mind, by the human race, and that many of these distinctions are purely conceptual. They're not absolute in any sense, and that they will ultimately all collapse as you keep observing deeper and deeper, keep meditating, keep contemplating, keep having mystical experiences. All of this will ultimately collapse into one unity, one ultimate absolute truth, which leads us to the next core principle, which is that absolute truth exists, but it cannot be thought, believed, imagined, communicated, spoken, written, proven, or argued. This is very difficult for most people to accept, especially many scientifically minded, rationally minded people. They tend to assume that if absolute truth does exist, then it must be possible to prove it or argue it or communicate it or write about it or imagine it or think about it. But the fact is that it's not, because all of those are limited, and the absolute truth is unlimited. It's absolute. That's what makes it so interesting and special and important. So this is just a brute fact of reality. You can go test it for yourself, and if you discover the absolute truth, what I'm claiming is that if you do the practices, one day you will discover the absolute truth, and once you do, you will realize that it cannot be thought, believed, imagined, communicated, spoken, written, proven, or argued. And yet, you will know about it more certainly than you know anything else in the world. How is that possible? Well, it can't really be explained or imagined or communicated, but it is possible through mystical experience, through lots of observation. Again, that's very important. It's a super important principle, because a lot of people get stuck arguing and trying to communicate and imagine and think about absolute truth. And you need to just know right off the bat that that's just not possible. So stop wasting your time doing that. You waste a lot of time doing that. You waste years and decades doing that. Just stop it. Your life will go a lot better. Another core principle is that reality is not material. Reality is not a physical object of any kind. Reality is a giant mind. Everything you think is physical, like walls, roads, cars, planets, solar systems, it's all one mind. These are all imaginings within a mindscape. And there is nothing outside of mindscape. Mindscape is all that there ever is. And again, this is not something you believe. This is something that you experience through direct observation. Lots and lots and lots of observation. Psychedelics help a lot as well. The next closely related principle is that life is a dream. And I have a whole episode called Life is a Dream, where I explain this, but it just basically is what it sounds like. Life is literally a dream. What you have here is just a dream. There is no external world beyond this dream that you're in. It's a dream just like the dreams you have when you're asleep at night. And just like those, it's possible to awaken from the dream, so you can awaken from life. This is a super important principle because it helps you to disidentify from all of your attachments that you have to this dream. You start taking the dream less seriously. And that's very important for living the good life. To live the good life, you must awaken from the dream. Otherwise, you're always going to be haunted by this dream and the stuff that happens within it. In the same way that, a nightmare terrifies you only because you're not aware that you're inside of a dream. But once you realize that it's just a dream, the nightmare is no longer a big deal. And ditto here. The next core principle is that reality is infinite and that God is a real thing. Not the Christian God sitting up in the clouds with a beard judging you, but the word God points to something that's very real. It points to infinity. And just what that is and how it works, that's complicated. I won't get into that here. It's also very controversial. It's also much misunderstood with many traps. This is also the same as talking about the absolute. So you can see that there's a problem talking about it or communicating about it because it's the absolute. But I have episodes. I have a 2-part series called, what's it called? It's called Understanding Absolute Infinity, part 1 and 2. Go check that out. That explains a lot of what infinity means and how reality could be infinite and what God is. And I'll have future episodes about what God is, explaining that. The next very important principle is that you are God. So God is not something separate from you. Literally, you are God. Not in the egotistical sense that you are a God and you can do anything you want in the world and you can be an asshole and be arrogant. Not that way. I mean, literally, you created yourself. You created the entire universe. You are the entire universe. This is a very advanced mystical insight that you will only get from years and years of meditation and spiritual practice. But you can get there. And it's very important that you do realize that you are God, because only then will you take full responsibility for your life. And only then will you really understand how profound life is and what existence is. Closely related follow-up principle to this is that God is the devil. There is absolutely no difference between God and the devil. They are the same thing because, again, what non-duality tells us is that every duality, including the duality between God and devil, is ultimately going to collapse into a unity. So God and the devil must collapse into a unity, which tells you, what's the value of knowing that God is the devil? Well, the value of it is that you stop seeing evil and being bothered by evil so much because you realize that all the evil you see out there, there's a higher intelligence behind it. It exists for a reason. It's part of infinity. It's part of all the stuff that you need to love and to embrace. And also, calling it the devil, the reason understanding the devil is so important, and by the way, I have a whole episode about what is the devil. Really good episode. Go check that one out. I think it's one of my best ones. It will change your whole understanding of this duality. Is that, you need to understand selfishness. You need to understand where evil comes from. You need to understand why reality is so deceptive. You need to understand Maya, in other words. And you need to understand that this is part of God. God is one deceptive motherfucker. And in fact, that's how reality comes into existence, is through various forms of deception. And that's why we say it's all one mind, it's all a dream. And so one aspect of this dream is that it's very hypnotic and it's very self-deceptive and it's very twisted and it can be very neurotic and pathological at times. That's all part of the entire whole. That's not something to cut out and to ignore. That's something to understand and to embrace. Otherwise, you will actually be yourself pathological by denying those aspects of reality. Another very important principle is that all identity is relative and fluid. So literally, there is no identity within reality other than oneness. So any limited identities that you create, like you as a body, you as a biological organism, you as somebody who was born to certain parents, or maybe you identify with your car, or you identify with your house, or you identify with your job, all of these identities that you have, they're all relative. They're all constructions of your mind. They're not absolutely true. And they're fluid and they can change. And in fact, they have been changing for all of your life. And that's very, very significant to understand. And any identity that other people take out there, whether they're individuals or entire cultural identities or political parties take identities, companies create identities, all of these identities that are being created, this is all part of ego, the ego mind, individual ego mind, collective ego mind. And this is all part of how God and the devil work, is through creating these identities. It's why you feel that you're a living creature. But all of these identities are rather arbitrary. And they're malleable, they're changeable. And this is a very good news, because it means you can change what you identify with, which means you can actually disidentify with your physical body and also your mind, and identify yourself with the ultimate, with the absolute, which ends up being the trick for overcoming death and attaining immortality. As preposterous as that sounds, it is nevertheless possible, and it is true. The next core principle is that 99.999% of people are deluded and asleep, and they don't know about any of the things that I am explaining here today. And that's extremely important to understand, because otherwise what's going to happen is that you're going to get lost in the delusions and asleepness of all the other people who are surrounding you. It's precisely because all the other people are so asleep that you can't look to them for advice or for guidance. Because you look over here, you look over there, you see people doing stupid stuff, you see people not doing this work, and then you think that, oh, well, that means I should be doing what they're doing. I'm weird for not doing what they're doing. But actually, no, they're the weird ones. They're the deluded ones. So keep that in mind. This is why you won't get a bunch of confirmation from science and from the medical community, from other traditional sources about the things that I talk about, because they're not there yet. Which leads us to the next closely related principle, which is that society is still in the dark ages. Yes, we're in the 21st century, but stop thinking of the 21st century as being some kind of like highly advanced society. No. We are still adolescents as a species. We are very, very immature, very unconscious, very emotionally stunted, very repressed, very neurotic, very pathological, very dysfunctional as a species. And our understanding of reality and consciousness and how to live the good life is very crude, akin to the kind of medical knowledge that existed in the Dark Ages, where they would use leeches and other sorts of crude techniques in order to cure people that actually ended up killing many people rather than curing them. That's the state of current society's understanding of spirituality, psychology, philosophy, science, and many other things. So do not get seduced by this facade that's erected by society, where we tend to think that, oh, well, we've already gone through the Dark Ages, and now we're out of the Dark Ages, and now we're very technologically advanced, and we have planes and cars and phones and all of this, computers and stuff, and because of this, we know everything. That's just a facade. Don't get tricked by it. And the reason it's important to realize that we're in the Dark Ages is because, again, that explains to you why you're not getting all this confirmation from your society. It's because you're assuming your society is far more advanced than it actually is. See? So don't expect society to just give you these answers while you're on social media or watching cable TV. The kind of advertisements you're getting there have nothing to do with how to live a good life. It's actually all the opposite. Again, this is one of the counterintuitive elements of life, is that the things that you're taught mostly in school and through the media and in the culture are precisely those things which lead to living a mediocre, miserable life, which of course explains why everyone or most people are living such a mediocre, miserable life. The next core principle is development and awakening, not either or, both. You want to awaken from the dream that you're in, but also you need to learn how to master living in the dream and develop yourself within the dream. These are sort of like two core avenues of growth that you're working towards in your life. You're developing yourself, and then you're also awakening from the dream. If you only develop yourself but you don't awaken, you will get lost in the dream and you will suffer. If you only awaken but you don't develop, then you're not going to have any mastery or excellence in living in the dream. And so you might be awake, and that's great, but then your development is stunted in certain ways. And that's also not you living up to your full potentials and getting the most juice out of life. You want both. And you're going to need a certain amount of development before you can even think about possibly awakening. To really seriously awaken, you already need to be very developed in most cases. It's very rare that someone just awakens while they're completely undeveloped. That's going to be hard for you to accomplish. A few rare people, 1 in 100 million maybe could do that, but I wouldn't count on that. The next core principle is figure out who you are and what you want out of life. This is super important. And it's not as easy as it sounds. You're not just going to sit down for 10 minutes and in 10 minutes figure out who you are and what you want in life. This is something you're going to have to work on, think about, contemplate, journal about, talk with coaches about, talk with therapists about for years, for decades. You're going to keep honing and honing and honing and refining your understanding of who you are and what you really want from life. You need as much clarity as possible about what you want from life. Absolutely important. This allows you to make decisions and allows you to channel your energy and your focus towards those things that you want. If you're not clear about what you want, if you're wishy-washy, vague, and ambiguous, you're going to get nothing. That's the default thing that you get, is nothing and mediocrity. You're not just going to randomly get a bunch of good stuff and a good life by not knowing what you want. You have to be very clear and decisive about what you want. You want to awaken? Then be fucking clear about it. I want to awaken. Do you want to have a house? What kind of house? Where should it be located? How much should it cost? Be clear about that. You want to have a girlfriend or a spouse? What kind do you want? Where are you going to find them? How is it going to really work? Do you really want them? You have to be very clear about all these things and about your career and everything. Which leads to the next core principle, which is authenticity. You need to be striving every day to be more and more authentic in your life. It's only when you're being authentic that you're truly satisfied and happy. And a lot of what society programs you with is reasons and incentives for being inauthentic. You see, all throughout school and university, and when you were dating people, and when you were at work, trying to get a job, and with your family and all of this, you were taught to be inauthentic as a survival strategy, such that you don't even know what it means to be authentic, how that really feels. You're so out of touch with who you are and what you really want and how you should authentically hold your body, how you should behave, how you should speak, how you should smile. Like, all of this is so fake for many people. So you need to get more and more in touch with your authenticity. Strip away all the layers of social conditioning that is preventing you from being authentic, and all the fears that you have and worries that are preventing you, such that you're able to express your deepest being, your deepest values. You need to be able to express that effortlessly to have a good life. And your career needs to be authentic. Your speech needs to be authentic. Your eye contact needs to be authentic. All right. What else? Your relationships with your family and your spouses and your girlfriends and boyfriends, that needs to be authentic. But for you to be able to do that, to achieve that, you first need to discover who you are and what you really want very clearly. And also you need to uncover the fears and incentives which are keeping you being inauthentic. See, like, what are you really afraid of? What are you going to lose? Are you going to get rejected? Are you going to be lonely and miserable? Are you going to be judged? The next core principle is that you need to develop a life purpose. I have a whole course about that. 25 hours long course on how to develop a life purpose. It's so important. Life purpose is the sense of what you're doing in your life. Again, it's all about clarity. It's about finding the right alignment between your values and what you really want and your career, and merging those together, and then working on that and building something of lasting value there that you can offer to the world. So check out my course if you're interested in that. The next core principle is take 100% responsibility for your life and don't blame anyone. Observe yourself blaming people and stop doing it. Train yourself to stop doing it. Take full responsibility. If you don't take full responsibility, anything less of 100%, that means you're going to be a victim in those areas that you don't take responsibility in, which means you're going to feel stuck and you're going to feel miserable and depressed and bitter and annoyed and frustrated. And that's the definition of not a good life. By taking responsibility, you assume the burden of solving every problem that comes your way. And that makes you very resourceful and creative, because now you've committed to solving all of these problems, to studying them, to doing self-experimentation, trying different techniques, turning to different sources, reading books and videos and courses and all of this to solve your problems. See? And it's only through this kind of attitude that you actually will end up solving your problems. Whereas most people, they just come up with excuses and blame others for why the problems can't be fixed. It's actually a lot better to be able to fix a problem than to suffer through it for the rest of your life. And it gives you a sense of power and strength and self-esteem when you do that. When you become a victim, you lose self-esteem and you start to feel bad about yourself, and you feel like you're weak and you're not able to handle life. And then you unplug from life, you become alienated, and you just kind of like go through the motions robotically. And that's when you lose touch with that, one of those core 4 purposes of life, which is feeling alive. You no longer feel alive because you're not actually taking challenges head on, because you've instead opted to be a victim. The next core principle is be a leader. Lead yourself, lead others around you. Don't wait other people to inspire you, to motivate you, to tell you what to do. You do that yourself. Be proactive. Be decisive. Take risks. This also connects with that principle of living a life and feeling alive. This is how you feel alive, is being a leader, being proactive, being decisive, taking some risks. Which leads to the next core principle, which is be a creator. Tap into the joy of creativity. You have the power to be a creator and to create all sorts of beautiful things. Art, music, film, writing, novels, magazines, websites, entire philosophical systems and schools and religions and spiritual groups. Like there's cars you could engineer, airplanes, new technology. Like there's so much stuff you can create. Pick something that you want to be a creator in, and then do that and enjoy that. You do it because it's enjoyable. Because as God, you're participating in the creative process of all of creation. And as a corollary here, provide massive value to mankind as the creator. That's something you should strive for. How do I provide lots of value to mankind? How do I contribute to society, improve the world? That's part of life purpose. That's very important, because if you are lacking this component in your life, you're going to feel empty. And also what's going to happen is that other people will come and seduce you with various kinds of low consciousness ideologies to get you to fill that void of a lack of purpose in your life, right? So then what happens is that people become Nazis, or they become terrorists, or they become some like right-wing fringe guy who posts on some forum some like racist stuff, like this kind of stuff, right? Why do people get sucked into these kinds of low consciousness ideologies? It's precisely because they lack a legitimate life purpose. They are not taught how to be powerful creators. They are not able to provide massive value to the world. So what they do instead is they focus their energy on demonizing, judging, doing violence, and other sorts of schemes and manipulation tactics to get their fill of life purpose. It's sort of like if you don't have a quality person to have sex with, then the way you're going to, it's not like you're never going to have sex. You will have sex. It's just, it's going to be probably in very low quality forms, like jerking off into a plastic cup. You see? So it's the same sort of thing with life purpose. If you neglect life purpose, you're going to pick up all sorts of dysfunctional life purposes unconsciously. That's like the default position. See? The next core principle is that reason cannot be trusted. This throws a lot of people for a loop, and this is very counterintuitive. But reason and rationality cannot be trusted. All the highest insights and truths are transrational. Not irrational, not less than rational, but trans, meaning beyond rational. Think of it this way. Every single criminal, terrorist, murderer, rapist, thief, religious fanatic, con artist, and wrong-headed scientist who did bad science, every single political party, every single tyrant and dictator, what do all these people have in common? Reason. You might think, no, Leo, these people are all unreasonable. No, every single one of these people has very good reasons for why they do what they do, and why what they do is exactly right and good, and why they should continue doing it. So how can you trust reason? By definition, reason always feels reasonable to the one who's reasoning. This is what I mean by the self-deception and by self-bias. See, you're self-biased to your own chains of reasoning. And what you don't understand is that reason is not a vehicle towards truth. It was never intended for that. Reason is concoctions by your mind, by your lawyerly mind, mostly your left hemisphere, for most people, in order to justify your egoic agenda. That's the real function of reason. So reason, just like a good lawyer, will be able to craft a case and an argument for any position. Any egoic agenda that you have. So reason cannot be trusted. Any time that you hear a speaker who is making appeals to reason and is arguing and saying and kind of framing the situation in such a way that, oh, those people are unreasonable, but I'm the reasonable one. And it's through reason that we get to the truth. Anytime you hear that, anytime you see a person trying to be extra reasonable, that's exactly the same as looking at a person who's trying to be extra moral. You become immediately suspicious that the person who's preaching morality and how good he is and how good everyone can be, but how they're all evil and how they should be as good as him, and that morality is going to solve everything. You should be immediately suspicious, and you should expect that that moralizing person has skeletons in their closet and that they're actually not moral. Well, the same thing with reason, with these people who tout reason as a sort of ideology or as a solution to everything. If only we were all more reasonable, then mankind would get along. Be very suspicious of that. The next core principle is to embrace paradox, confusion, and not knowing. Again, this is one of those very counterintuitive things. Most people think of paradox, confusion, and not knowing as bad things, as the opposite of personal development and the opposite of a good life. But no, it's just the opposite. The closer you get to the good life, the more you will embrace paradox, confusion, and not knowing. And you will get comfortable with these things. It's the person who thinks he's figured everything out perfectly in this little model and put it all into a little model. And he thinks that that model is perfect, it's consistent, and it's airtight and it's super logical. It's that person who's deluded. You can't do that with reality because reality is infinite and all your little models and schemes are all finite. See my episode about Gödel's incompleteness theorem if you want to understand why that's impossible. Kurt Gödel actually proved that truth is larger than proof. Very counterintuitive discovery. The next core principle is emotional mastery. You should be very interested in mastering your emotions. You should be very interested in emotions, period, and how they work, and spend a lot of your time observing emotions. Now, here's a mistake that people make about emotional mastery. Is when I say emotional mastery, they think, oh yeah, Leo, that sounds good. I'll just be hyper-rational. I'll be this unemotional, detached person who's above it all. That's not emotional mastery. That's a suppression or repression of emotions. To develop emotional mastery, you need to feel deeper into your emotions. And this is a lot of the type of concern that women have. Women can object to some of my teachings. They might say, Leo, but you're teaching us how to be like unemotional and robotic, and I want to be more emotional. No, what I'm talking about is how to be more emotional. Emotional mastery does not mean that you stop experiencing emotions. It actually means you experience emotions deeper, but you're more conscious of what they actually are. And that's what gets you mastery and control, which should also be distinguished from outbursts of negative emotions. So somebody else listening here might say, oh, Leo, so what you're saying here, to become an emotional master, I have to let all my emotions out and be fully authentic with my emotions. That means that if someone cuts me off in traffic, I will open my window and scream expletives at that person because I'm angry, and now I'm being authentic. I'm expressing my anger. And this is developing emotional mastery. No, that's not emotional mastery. That's actually a smokescreen from fully feeling and observing your own emotions. Yelling at people, outbursts, anger, violence, expressions of negative emotions, these are often just smoke screens from really self-reflecting and feeling your own emotions. An angry person doesn't really feel their emotions. They just act them out robotically. And you want to read books about emotional mastery and about how emotions work, because emotions are so sneaky and so tricky. And, speaking of reason and emotions, these rationalists, they think that reason is superior to emotions, but actually it's the other way around. It's emotions which are dominating your reasoning process. Those people who are hyper-rational, they're not hyper-rational, really. They're emotional. They're just not conscious of the emotions that are fueling their reason. You see, the reason that they're so attached to reasoning is emotional. And it's because it's connected with their ego mind, which is full of emotions. Emotions are much more powerful in motivating you and affecting your behavior than any reasons that you have. Reasons come after the fact. Reasons are rationalizations. They're backwards rationalizations. Your left hemisphere actually confabulates these reasons later to justify whatever you're doing emotionally, whatever's driving you emotionally. And to live the good life, you're not going to be able to do that through reason. You're going to have to do that by becoming very observant of your emotions. And it's by curing your emotions that then your reasoning process will also get purified along with that. The next core principle is you must integrate the masculine and the feminine. No matter whether you're a guy or a girl, and whether you lean more masculine or more feminine, and there's a whole spectrum there, and people lean in different directions and so forth, as of course we're all aware at this point. But what you need to do, whichever direction you lean in, so let's say you're a man that leans masculine, like most men, and you're a woman that leans feminine. Okay, so what you need to do as a man is you need to go deeper into your masculinity to understand what it really is. But at the same time, you want to make sure you don't create a shadow out of the feminine, so you're not doing it at the expense of the feminine. You also need to dive into your feminine side and explore that and master that and integrate that feminine shadow into you. And you need to actually become sort of a synthesis of both. And, vice versa for the woman. This is very important for you to be able to then relate properly with the opposite sex. Otherwise, you're going to become masculine, but you're going to have the feminine shadow or vice versa. And that's going to create all sorts of relationship problems for you. And also, you're not going to feel as good just being macho masculine or girly feminine without integrating the other side. So like what we're trying to become is full, well-rounded human beings. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be down the middle 50-50. So, if you're a masculine man, I'm not saying that you need to be half masculine and half feminine. You can still specialize and kind of be predominantly masculine, but you also need to integrate the feminine aspects into your psyche. And make sure you don't hold any kind of grudges or judgments about the opposite polarity. The next core principle is non-manipulation. If you do a lot of observation of your behaviors, you will notice how much you manipulate. You manipulate all the time. The ego mind, that's sort of its whole role, is to be constantly manipulating everything. You're manipulating your thoughts, your face, your body posture, your relationships, and in your work and in your career and all of this, you're constantly manipulating. And so one of the things you need to do if you want to live a good life is let go of that manipulation more and more and more and more. The less manipulative you are as a person, the better your life will be. The next core principle is that everything is relative. What this means is that anything except the absolute, the ultimate truth of the capital T, is relative. That means that it's only known in relation to something else. And I'll have a whole episode in the future about relativity and how that contrasts with the absolute. But briefly here, all conventional understanding and even conventional experience that you have, it's always relative. So an elephant is big only relative to a mouse. It's small relative to the entire earth, and so on. And so this goes on and on and on, and affects everything that you know. Everything you know is basically relative. All perspectives are relative. Your entire understanding of reality is relative. All truth claims, unless they're the absolute, which is not really a claim at all, it's something way beyond that. All truth claims in words, all beliefs, this is all relative. All cultural norms, all moral standards, it's all relative. Science is relative. Relative to what? Relative to the human mind. If the human mind is changed, if the chemistry of the human mind is changed, all science flies out the window and all changes. Relative. See? What you see, what you experience, what you know, politics and government and business, it's all relative. It's relative to the particular circumstances and context in which it's situated. And if the context changes, then the situation changes, your knowledge changes. None of that is absolute. There is no absolute external world, physical world, material world. Which leads us to the next principle, which is context over facts. Most people get very stuck on facts, but they don't realize the importance of context. Context is the background within which the facts are situated. And I have a whole episode about context, which is called Understanding Recontextualization. Go check that one out. It's a pretty profound episode with lots of examples that I won't go into here. The next core principle is to pull from hundreds of diverse sources. This is done so that you don't get stuck in any one perspective or paradigm. This is absolutely critical. As you're going through life and you're doing this whole lifelong learning thing, which is one of your principles, then you need to be gathering from a lot of diverse sources. Don't just read Western books, read Eastern books. Don't just read Hinduism, read Christianity and read Greek philosophy and, spread it around, diversify. Diversify your portfolio of knowledge and information just like you would stocks in a stock market. For exactly that same reason, because you want to avoid getting locked into some one thing, some one terrible paradigm, which is very limiting. And what will happen if you study hundreds of diverse perspectives, and this is one of the core principles of actualize.org, is that I do this very seriously, then the truth will get triangulated and cross-referenced from all these different sources and books you read. You read hundreds of books. Eventually, it all gets triangulated, and then it emerges. The big picture emerges. That would be impossible if you were only studying one particular school or one tradition, or one guru, or one discipline within a university. You couldn't do that. And It's only because you're studying all these diverse sources that you learn about all the traps and you learn about the full diversity of this thing called human life and human development. And there's so much more there than you could have possibly gotten from any one school, teacher, or teaching, which of course applies to me. You can't take me as your only source. You need to include me as part of hundreds of other sources that you study from. The next principle is to satisfy your base needs so that you stop craving. This is very important. I have an episode that I released quite a bit ago called Using Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs to Self-Actualize. And what I talked about there is it's all about satisfying your lower needs, your basic needs for shelter and water and food and sex and this sorts of stuff and some friendships and some self-esteem stuff like your career. You got to handle that stuff so you're not craving it, so that you can move higher up the pyramid to this higher metaphysical, existential stuff that we talk about. This is so important. Which leads to the next closely related principle of master your basic survival and livelihood. This is utterly important. If you don't do this, it's as though you were a lion on the savannah and you didn't know how to hunt. A lot of people these days, especially young folks, I see this very often, teenagers, people in their early 20s, they grew up in a cushy suburb somewhere in the United States or maybe in Europe, and their parents coddled them. And so these kids, they just spent their whole childhood playing video games and watching movies and just like dicking around in school with their friends and stuff, smoking weed and this kind of stuff. And then by the time they're 20 and maybe they finish even university, they get out into the real world and they have no idea about how to actually survive or make a livelihood. And then they start thinking about some of the high, lofty things I talk about, like consciousness and psychedelics and enlightenment and this. But it's like, what enlightenment can there be when you don't even know how to hunt? Learn how to hunt. The modern day equivalent for human beings of what a lion does on a savannah is business. Learn business. Learn how business works. Learn how money works. This is absolutely essential. Without this, you're going to be crippled. You need to be able to just handle the basic things like paying your rent, being able to afford food. If you can't do these things, forget about enlightenment for now. Focus on handling that. And of course, that's all a function of your inner game. So it's not because the economy is bad that you struggle with survival and livelihood. It's because your parents and your schooling and your childhood, they didn't program you with those the inner game survival skills that you need to earn a living in the savannah, the modern day savannah that humans live in and grow up in, which is cities and suburbs. See, a lion needs a certain set of skills to be able to survive in savannah, and a human in the 21st century needs a certain kind of skills and a certain kind of inner game and psychology to be able to make a living and survive in a city or in a suburban environment. That's super important. I spent at least probably 10 years of my life really working on developing a way for how to be independent and survive on my own without depending on my parents or money from other places or anything like that. So I could be self-sufficient. And then it's based on that foundation that then I could go and do the higher stuff that I do. I couldn't do that otherwise. Like if I was worrying about how to pay my bills tomorrow, I couldn't do this other work that I'm doing, the higher stuff. Because I would always be in this kind of cycle of fear, not knowing what's next, how to make ends meet, this sort of stuff. You got to figure that out. If it takes you 5 or 10 years, that's okay. Figure that out. That's basically what you need to be spending your teenage years and all of your 20s up through your 30s doing. You want to solve that by the time you're 30, ideally, if not sooner. The next core principle is mastery. You need to have something, at least one thing in your life that you are going to plan to become a master in. I don't care what it is. There are millions of options. You could be a master at drawing, painting, music, DJing, weightlifting, life coaching, writing, programming, whatever. You got to pick one thing though and do it. This jack of all trades thing where you're just dabbling in a bunch of shit, that doesn't work. You need one thing that you're going to master. This is connected with your life purpose. This is also connected with your thing that I just said about survival and livelihood. You know, the lion is a master at chasing down antelopes, master at hunting. This gives you a certain stability. It also gives you enjoyment because really your work, which you're going to be doing most of your life, the enjoyment that you get from that depends on how much of a master you are. And it takes 5 or 10 years to become a master in something. So you got to pick one thing and do it so that you could produce excellent work and so that you could be a creator and you could be a massive value provider to society. One of the biggest things I think young people are screwing up on these days, millennials and so forth, is that they don't pursue mastery. They're not a master at anything. They don't know how to do anything. And therefore they can't provide value to anyone. And therefore you're stuck with some kind of waitressing job or working at McDonald's. Yeah, that's what happens when you're a master of nothing. Start by mastering one thing that you really enjoy. And it is important that you enjoy this thing that you're going to be mastering because you're going to be putting so much time and effort into it. So you better enjoy it a lot. Now, this doesn't mean you can't have hobbies. I'm not saying that, like right now, if you're playing a guitar just for fun and you're an amateur at it, that doesn't mean you have to become a master guitarist. Because, hey, maybe your field of mastery is programming. So if you're a master at programming, sure, you can go dabble in guitar and you can go dabble in painting. It doesn't matter because you're a master in programming. You got at least that one thing. But if you're not a master at anything and you're just dabbling and trying a bunch of different stuff without selecting anything and being decisive and clear about it and not being certain about what you want to master, that's going to come back to bite you really hard later in life. And the older you get, the harder it is to master things. So start young. But if you're old, still do it. Better late than never. The next core principle is be aware of distractions. I have a whole episode. By the way, I do have an episode about mastery. It's an older one. You can go check it out. It's called Mastery. I have an episode about distractions. It's called The Ego's Favorite Defense Mechanism, Distraction. Go check that one out, where I list all the different distractions that the ego mind comes up with to prevent you from doing this work, from creating the good life. These distractions, of course, include stuff like TV, porn, video games, internet, social media, various kinds of ideologies, and family can be a distraction, kids can be a distraction, chasing material success, business, money, drugs, all these can be distractions. So you got to be very careful. This is all part of the self-deceptive nature of the ego mind. The next principle is systems thinking. You need to become a systems thinker. Learn to think in terms of systems, learn to see systems at work everywhere. And develop awareness for the ecological interconnectedness of things. I have a whole episode called Intro to Systems Thinking, which will do just that, introduce you to systems thinking and explain all of this stuff. If you don't know what systems thinking is, there are books you can read about it on my book list. It's a pretty deep topic. People who aren't systems thinkers aren't very good at solving bigger problems. They tend to think of problems in the world very simplistically in black and white ways, and they think that every problem is just, has one root cause or something like that, where usually in a system, you have a lot of factors that are coming into play. You have various kinds of feedback loops that you need to think about. Systems tend to work in counterintuitive ways. Oftentimes, you're trying to change a system. The thing you do to change the system actually ends up worsening the problem rather than improving it. So it's because of this that this is important. This is going to help you to actually make the contribution to the world that you want to make, because almost anything that you're going to be interacting with in the world that's of any interest is going to be a complex system of one form or another, especially if we're talking about large groups of people, businesses, societies, cultures. Those are all systems. Another core principle is be a good citizen and be conscious of your ecological footprint. You are part of a larger whole. You are like one ant in an ant colony. And you need to become conscious that you are an ant in an ant colony, that you're connected to the entire colony, that your existence is not something you do independently. You do it as part of the entire collective that you're a part of. And you need to seek to educate yourself about how that works. Part of that is systems thinking, because this colony is a system. But also you need to teach yourself about what impact are you having on the larger culture and the larger working of this colony that you're in. Are you contributing to the lowering of its consciousness or the raising of its consciousness? Are you contributing to the problems or are you helping solve the problems? Are you being a good citizen? That requires a lot of education, teaching yourself about politics and governance and how collective ego works and how ecology works and your environmental impact. Even when you're walking down the sidewalk eating ice cream, what are you going to do with the wrapper? Are you going to throw it on the ground? Or are you conscious of how you're contributing to that? Are you conscious of how, when you're driving your car, you're contributing to air pollution? Are you conscious of how, you being a citizen of the United States, for example, contributes to the wars that the United States starts overseas? Are you conscious of your role in that, or are you just blind to that? Are you conscious of the kind of food that you eat and how that impacts the environment and animals and other human beings? Are you conscious of the products that you buy and how that impacts third world countries where these products might be developed under sweatshop conditions? Right? And you take responsibility for that, and you strive to be a good citizen. Otherwise, what you get is you get a kind of a crummy society that's unconscious, a kind of society that you don't want to live in. Another core principle is be strategic. I have a very popular episode called How to Be a Strategic Motherfucker. It's one of my most practical episodes. That's why people like it. I go into a lot of nuances there about how to be strategic, but you need to be able to be patient with your plans. You need to lay out plans, have a long time horizon, think 5-10 years down the road, plan stuff out in your life, and be strategic about it so that you're moving towards the things that you really want. And you need to have some short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, etc. You need to be able to go through multiple stepping stones to reach some kind of goal. A lot of people, it's like they want something, but then that something is over here and they're over here. They don't see a path to get there and they're not able to create the stepping stones to move their way up. And in fact, most of the biggest things in life that you want to acquire are going to require multiple stepping stones to inch your way towards them. You're not going to be able to just leap and get it in one step. The next core principle is that happiness is only possible with enlightenment. So if you're not enlightened, don't kick yourself too much for not being happy. It's actually not possible. Happiness comes with enlightenment. Now, that doesn't mean you can't improve your level of happiness. Of course you can, and you should. You should work to increase your happiness as much as you can, even though you won't be able to really lock in your happiness without enlightenment. You don't even know what true happiness is without enlightenment. But also what this principle demonstrates to you is why enlightenment is so important. Because what you ultimately want is happiness. And the only way you're going to get it is through enlightenment. So don't put enlightenment off for too long. Another related principle is that no material possessions will ever make you happy. This is impossible. This is like a law of physics. This is like more certain and reliable than Newton's law of gravity or Einstein's equations of E equals mc squared. This is more certain than that. No material possession will ever make you happy, no matter what it is. Cars, houses, money, yachts. But not just that. Also, the stuff that you normally wouldn't consider material, like relationships, family, knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge, travel. You think travel is not material? Well, I'm including all of that under the label of material here. None of that stuff will make you happy. Guaranteed. Impossible. The sooner you can accept that, the much better your life will go. If you haven't yet understood this principle, you're going to be chasing for many, many years. You're going to waste decades of your life. The next related core principle is be happy all by yourself. Train yourself to be happy all alone, just sitting doing nothing. That doesn't mean you have to be a loner for your whole life. You can socialize and have fun with friends, that's okay. But if you can't be happy just sitting on your couch doing nothing, you really can't be happy. All the other stuff is just temporary little boosts, little shots of adrenaline and excitement, little drugs, really, that are distracting you from doing the inner work you got to do to just be happy sitting there by yourself on a couch for an hour or two, or a whole day, or a whole week. The next core principle is keep your life simple and Spartan. Don't overclutter your life, not just with objects, but also with all kinds of social obligations and commitments, family and a bunch of kids and all this. Now, that doesn't mean there's a problem with having kids and family. Of course, you can have those things, but just be mindful of the fact that anytime your life sort of frees up, your ego mind tends to want to fill it with just any kind of distraction or activity. What you want to do is you want to minimize your life, and I have a whole video called Lifestyle Minimalism. Check that out. Minimize your life so that you have room, several hours every day, to do self-improvement and to meditate and do spirituality, maybe do some psychedelics, this sort of stuff, so that you can work on everything we're talking about here, right? Everything we're talking about here, the implementation of all these principles, requires a lot of free time and work, which most people waste on various kinds of frivolous activities. Don't buy a house too big that you don't really need, because you're going to waste time cleaning that house, maintaining that house, doing all this stuff, when really buy a smaller house instead, so that you waste less of that time doing that and instead spend more time working on yourself. Because remember, the really good stuff is the inner game. Changing the inner game is really what's going to make you happy and satisfied and get you all the other stuff that you want, not having a big palatial mansion house. The next core principle is that without practice and exercises and techniques, there will be no results. Theory alone, while important to know what to do, will not in itself produce much results. Like 95% of your results will come from the practices and exercises and techniques, not from the theory. That doesn't mean the theory is pointless. The theory is very useful, but you got to go beyond that. And as far as techniques go, let me share with you the most powerful techniques that I've discovered. Very simple. I'm not going to hold them back from you. Psychedelics, meditation, meditative yoga, journaling, contemplation, visualization, and solo retreats. These are the most powerful techniques that I've discovered in the last 5 or 10 years of doing this work. For me, now for you, there might be other techniques, but these are pretty solid and consistent techniques. These techniques have been proven by thousands and millions of people to produce some of the biggest gains that you can get in your life. Some of the biggest transformations come from these techniques. And notice that most of these techniques are inner techniques. Even psychedelics seems like an outer technique, but it's an inner technique. It's an outer technique which triggers an inner process. And the final principle, and a very important one, is do not turn actualize.org into an ideology. Actualize.org is not meant to be an ideology. It's not meant to really be a philosophy or a system of any kind. It's not meant to have any rigid principles or rules. You're not supposed to follow these 65 principles that I gave you like the 10 Commandments. Nothing like that, because that would violate principle number 1, which is ideology and dogma. So I have to be careful every time I speak that it doesn't turn into that. And of course, I have to play my part, but you have to play your part. Because I can do everything in my power, but then you can still turn what I say into an ideology or into a dogma. And in fact, that's what most people do. So you have to be very careful not to turn actualize.org into another religion. See, to be able to implement all the stuff I talked about above, you need to be very intelligent about it, and you need to be very thoughtful and mindful, and you need to be very context sensitive. You see, it's not a formula that you just kind of like follow. It's not a robotic thing that you do. It requires consciousness. It requires active participation every single day that you're implementing this stuff. And also, of course, the reason I say this is because actualize.org teachings have certain limitations. It's still a perspective. Even though I cover hundreds of perspectives and I compile them together, it's still a perspective. It's still coming from me. It still has certain limitations and biases that I have and stuff that I got to work through. And of course it has that, which is why you got to be careful and you got to look at other sources and not turn this into an ideology. So those are the 65 principles. Now, of course, I have left stuff out. These are like the major principles of actualize.org. There are hundreds of more minor principles, which I've talked about in other episodes, which would be too long to include here. But, I've left out some important stuff like physical health, fitness, nutrition, and other things like that, which are still important. But as far as actualize.org goes, these 65 principles, I think, encapsulate a lot of what I teach. All right, that's it. I'm done here. Please click that like button for me and come check out actualize.org. That's my website. You'll be able to find my blog with various insights, my book list with lots of books, the Life Purpose course, and the forum where you can chat about all this stuff. And finally, I'll just conclude by saying this last thing. And this you might think of like as the final core principle, is that life is complex and challenging. Life is extremely deep, but also very broad. There are many, many, many facets to it. So just because you understand some one or two facets, don't get too cocky and think that you've got it all. There's so much here to explore. It's going to take you your entire lifetime to explore, and you still will have much left over for future lifetimes. And life is challenging, which means that you have to appreciate that, I went into a lot of depth here in this episode. It's almost like a 2-hour episode here. And still, I've only kind of just glossed over the surface of these principles. It will take you years to study and learn all of these principles. Don't get intimidated by that. Just realize that, yes, that's because life is so complex and it is challenging. It's difficult to learn all this stuff, which is exactly why most people have a mediocre life. Because it takes a lot of work and energy and time to study all this stuff, to verify for yourself that it's true. It's one thing to just listen to me and believe everything I say. That in and of itself will take you a couple hours here at least. But that's not enough. To actually go and verify each of these principles for yourself, to corroborate and cross-reference with other sources, to triangulate the truth, to get other perspectives, to see where I might be wrong in all of this, and then to implement all that in your life, that will take years and decades. But hey, that's why you're alive, and that's why you got 80 years to live, is so that you can do this. This is the meat of life right here. Everything else that you do is just a garnish. This is the main course. So try to structure your life in such a way that you're focused on the main course and not the garnishes of life. And also, this should alert you to the fact that there are no easy answers. See, there's no one technique, no one magic pill, no one method that will solve everything for you, because life is just too broad for that to work. So you got to be nuanced. No black and white simplistic answers here. That's why my episodes are so long, because, the kind of stuff you could fit into a 5 or 10 minute episode, just like what? It's not going to make a dent in the real issues you have in your life. It's only going to be rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. And I want to really help you to get to the root of things, to get to the ultimate peak experiences, those mystical experiences, to handle all the bottom of the pyramid, to get to the very top of Maslow's pyramid, and to go even beyond that. That's where, oh man, that's where life gets really good. That's what I'm really passionate about teaching and experiencing for myself. And then, of course, you take that wisdom and you bring it back down to the bottom of the pyramid, and you infuse the bottom with the top. And then that's when your life really becomes something special. So we're going to continue talking about that more and more. That's what all my episodes are geared towards. Hopefully now you have a good understanding of what actualize.org is about, and you can follow these principles to create a really powerful life. I hope you can see the value of what's being shared here. Do not take it for granted. This day, today, from this information, from now on, if you really make a commitment, you can change the entire trajectory of the future of your life in an amazing way. But it's not enough just to make that commitment. You're also going to have to remember to work at it every single day from now on as well. Yes, it's challenging, but that's why Actualize.org exists, is I keep releasing new videos to release more insights for you, more techniques, and also just to keep you motivated, inspired, and reminded that you've made this commitment. So stay tuned with me for more, if for no other reason than just to have me remind you that this is what you really want, because it's very easy to forget and to fall back asleep in with all your friends. And then before you know it, 10, 20 years goes by and you've pissed it all away and you have nothing to show for it. And you're more depressed and miserable and regretful than ever.
Alrighty, my friends, what is up? Welcome back to another video. I have had a lot of people ask me what my favorite books are, right? Books are fucking amazing. I get this question maybe like once a day, maybe even more. Books, they've changed my life. I'm sure they've changed yours. That's why you're looking for more to read, of course. So we'll hop straight into it with my book recommendations. And now I want you to keep in mind that this doesn't really have anything to do with business, but they have helped my business in more ways than one. And the reason that is because of pattern recognition, and because business, you're working with other people. So understanding other people, improving yourself, gaining that self-awareness is also a business hack, because you are gaining awareness of how other people live. You're diving a bit into psychology, whether you know it or not, etc., etc. And where I've learned most of my business stuff is through trial and error and specific knowledge via courses. So in terms of business, I recommend courses over books, unless you want a foundational understanding of like influence, persuasion, specific tactics, whatever it may be. But in terms of self-improvement or even spirituality, philosophy, definitely recommend books. So the very first one is The Power of Now. Those that know me, you know that I talk about The Power of Now like all the time. And the reason behind that is because of how I came across this book. When I was younger and just getting into fitness, I was watching Matt Ogus and all of them in the like kind of golden era of fitness YouTube. And he brought up the book, The Power of Now, to me when he was in a contest prep. So he's very low body weight. His hormones and emotions are screwing with him. So he resorted to mindfulness and The Power of Now to help with that. And he talked about how it really helped. Now, how I came across this book is first year of college. I was smoking weed in the top of a parking garage on campus. Long story short, I ended up getting arrested for smoking on campus, and I thought nothing would come of it. And when I went home for the summer to work as a lifeguard, I got a letter in the mail from the court, and it was like, you can either go through this 12-week program, pay like $5,000, or you can go to court, try to defend your case, and possibly be convicted of a felony. And so I'm like, well, fuck, this isn't good at all. I went through a couple days of just like worrying a lot, being super stressed out, didn't show my parents. It's like, I can't afford $5,000 as a college student working a part-time job over the summer. It just wasn't gonna happen. And so I picked up the book, The Power of Now, read through it, and kind of all my worries just washed away. Now, the thing with this book is that you have to be open-minded. You have to be at a specific level of development, right? In terms of like the pre-trans fallacy, you can't be in the pre-rational stage, or maybe you can't be in the rational stage if you're trying to absorb the teachings of this book, because it's just not going to make sense to you. It's going to sound too woo-woo. You haven't had those spiritual experiences before, that direct experience to kind of open your mind to this world and the difference between animal and human, right? So Power of Now, highly recommend. I also recommend A New Earth, which is his sequel. After this, it's Eckhart Tolle's sequel, so I also recommend that. Now, the next one is The Way of the Superior Man, and this is by David Deida. It's also a spiritual book. A lot of these are philosophy, spirituality, which is pretty much like non-scientific psychology in a sense. It's just the things that one, psychology either has discovered scientifically or has yet to discover, and is just based on direct experience. So it's kind of a way to get more information and try things out and experience things directly for yourself, rather than relying on science to give you this black and white, yes, you should do this, no, you shouldn't do this. That's not how humans work, in a sense. And now I'm not discounting science at all, but just saying. And now The Way of the Superior Man, what it is kind of like a spiritual guide to masculinity. What masculinity is supposed to be, rather than the toxic shit and the egoically driven toxic masculinity that you see nowadays. This will help you understand it on a much deeper sense and kind of that masculine feminine balance, while being able to like be in a healthy relationship as a masculine man. That's one thing that he prefaces this book with, is that it won't really apply to the people that have more of a feminine essence, right? It applies to the people that have that masculine essence and don't know how to harness it for fulfilling relationships with that masculine feminine dynamic. Now the next one is the Kybalion. And now I posted all of these on TikTok, and you can easily see like what developmental stages people are in when they leave a comment, because they're saying like this is some satanic shit. You haven't read the book, you don't have that awareness. Why are you saying that? The Kybalion is Hermetic philosophy, and it's 7 principles that are broken down, and it's pretty much I think it is how reality functions, right? You have to read it to understand it, but in essence it breaks down these 7 principles of how life works from a very meta foundational perspective, and it'll help you navigate the world and kind of zoom out. That's why I like reading philosophy and spirituality, is because it's big picture thinking, right? It primes your brain to zoom out and see the entire picture rather than get hyper focused on some technical detail that isn't going to help you in any way at all. It's like a big picture strategy where then when you come back in, you have that feedback to know if you're moving in the right direction. Now, the next one is The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. Now, some people argue that Alan Watts, all of his stuff is discredited because he died an alcoholic or something, when that is in line with his teachings. He doesn't say anything. He's a bodhisattva, right? He's still human. But the thing I love about Alan Watts is that he serves as inspiration for my writing and just the way I want to be able to think, right? He's very poetic. What he says is art. Like his writing, his speaking, it's art, and it has taken a lot of practice, and that's what it is for me. While the contents of the book are absolutely amazing, the real value that I pull from it is kind of just being awestruck by how he wrote that specific thing, and that alone holds value within itself. It really does. Now, the next one, this will be the last spiritual one, kind of, is Awareness by Anthony DeMello. J.K. Molina, a lot of you know him. He turned me on to this book. It's fucking great. It's an amazing book. It will help you navigate the world in a better way, a more calm, collected, and aware way. And it talks about gaining awareness of almost everything. Being aware of your thoughts, your actions, other people, how they react, how you can react to them, and all of this other stuff. It's just a way to develop your spiritual well-being and just the way you navigate conversations, in a sense, and become aware of certain things so you can not only overcome them, but kind of dissolve these negative traits and beliefs and mindsets that you have adopted over time through cultural conditioning. Now, the next 2 play into each other very, very well. The first one is The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. I don't have these books anymore because they're on my Kindle, so I can't show them to you. But The Art of Impossible is pretty much talking about peak performance and how to get into that peak flow state and accomplish impossible things. And from what I've read, I would assume that his definition of impossible are things that the average person would think are impossible. Like, oh, working for myself and starting an online business and only working 2 hours a day, that's impossible. No, you can't do that. And yes, you can. It's extremely possible. And the thing behind this, and that really stuck out to me, was the 5 drivers of flow. I believe that's what it was from him. But it's curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And all of these play into each other, and they also lead to each other. So curiosity, something I talk about a lot because it's fucking important, is the first step and will lead to these other things. And it talks about how to cultivate this passion based around your interests, your curiosities, how to assign a purpose to it, how to gain autonomy, or that you need autonomy in order to pursue these things fully. And then mastery is the step above that. And then the rest of it is talking about skill acquisition, creativity, all of this other stuff. But the 7th book, which is Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I probably butchered that fucking crazy ass name, but that put all of the pieces together for me. If you read all of these books in this succession, you would make incredible connections when you read Flow afterwards. It's pretty much his life's work was dissecting the psychology of flow, the flow state, and other ancient teachers and spiritual gurus, some called it a degree of flow state, the present moment, the now, no mind, all of this stuff. It's degree of this flow state. And the one main lesson that stuck out to me in Flow was the concept of psychic entropy and the concept of consciousness, which is kind of like a storage of your experiences in your mind, right? Because the human brain, or humans as a whole, can process 126 bits of information per second. Throughout their entire lifetime, they can process 185 billion units of information, or bits of information. Now, if you take this 185 billion bits, and that's what you can process, and part of that is what is stored in your consciousness as memory or direct experience, or the things you have awareness of, right? I can bring back the analogy of a map, where in a video game, there's a map. If you're in this specific location, it's bright on the map, and you have awareness of everything that's within it, right? And then if you venture into the unknown or the darkness and you shine the light of awareness on that map, then it opens up, but it also gets stored in your consciousness, right? Or in your head, and you can pull from that experience. And now this 185 billion bits of information is your potential as a human being, right? The depth of information that you store in this 185 billion bits is it matches your potential or your experience level in a game, right? Because if you're just going through the motions of life and you're experiencing this very shallow and average existence, and you aren't making connections or diving deeper into specific areas of life where more connections are made that many people haven't discovered before in their life, by doing and acting and building businesses and like getting fit in the gym, you start to operate at a much higher level, and life becomes much more meaningful and fulfilling. And that is the main topic and lesson of the book. So those are the 7 books. I have many more that I could give. So if you like this style of video and you want more book recommendations, let's try, I don't know what the average number of likes I get. Let's try to get to 100 likes. 100 likes, not that much. If I can get to 100 likes, I'll make a part 2 of this. Leave a comment as well, letting me know what your favorite books are, and if there are any that I left out, or just if you want to know more. And then of course, as always, Discord, newsletter, private community, link in the description. And with that, I will see you in the next video.
All right, my friends, let's go over the 3-point content ecosystem. So this is a broad overview before we dive into each part, right? I want you to understand what we're doing from a top-down view before we understand how to write the newsletter, how to write threads or LinkedIn posts or carousels or captions or other medium form content, but then also how to write tweets from those things and how it all kind of plays together, right? So first, the reason behind this is because, one, most people that start on social media don't prioritize long form content. This is a mistake because everyone's telling you, oh, you need to, Instagram is giving a lot of traffic to people that do shorts, and oh, TikTok's blowing up, and this, that, and the other's blowing up. And it's like, that's cool, but you're not building any depth. You're not allowed to do what you know or what you enjoy doing because you have to cater to the algorithm the entire time. You're not building authenticity. You're not building authority. You're not building trust. Sometimes, maybe, but are you going to go from landing a TikTok to, say, instantly closing a $5,000 to $10,000 coaching client? No, probably not. You may be able to sell courses here and there, but you're still not building, you're not nurturing the audience, which is a huge part of sales and marketing, right? And so the other option is to build out like email sequences, lead magnets, whatever it may be. But I've just found this to work better, and it is much more aligned with the lifestyle that I want to create and the things that I want to write about, right, on a consistent basis. So this is my blog, right? So if you use Beehive or Substack or something else, this is pretty much your backlogged newsletters, right? That's what these are going to be. And so in mine, we're going to go over these two, which are my most recent ones, and it helps illustrate this content ecosystem fairly well. Now, the one thing that won't be included here is the YouTube video just yet. This is a writing course, so that's something I'll go over. But I do use these as YouTube scripts, and then I end up posting them here. So then when I do link my blog post under content to send people to it, they can also subscribe on YouTube or watch the video. So I don't have to plug the YouTube video over and over. It just gets traffic over time. So the first one that we are going to go over, and this, I may not have illustrated the importance of this enough yet, is that one, email sequences are static, right? You can test them, do whatever. Lead magnets, they're static. Having a newsletter that you write every single week not only keeps you creative, not only is it fun, not only does it allow you to do what you love for what you write, because you're not dependent on the algorithm for growth. Like when you write tweets and other things, yeah, you're going to have to cater to the algorithm. You're going to have to try and get engagement, but you don't have to do that in your blogs and newsletters, right? Which is the keystone, the cornerstone of your week. Now, the benefit of this is that when you plug a lead magnet, like a free download, that's what a lead magnet is you're aiming for their email, but there's no depth or authority. So what a backlog newsletter does is, one, they can subscribe to get these emails weekly so that you can promote in a different way. But not only that, they get to read, they get exposed to your products, which once they've built depth and once they trust you and once they like you after reading your newsletter, they're 10 times more likely to buy, right? And so they read through the newsletter, and these are like little salesmen, right? They're little salesmen online that they're like lead magnets, sales pages, and anything else in one. They build the depth behind your brand that can't be done with just a few tweets. People can read tweets from yours, but you know those accounts where they get a ton of engagement, but I guarantee they make less than $1,000 a month because they don't have any depth or authority or trust or loyalty or uniqueness to them. That's where this system comes into play, and that's what this fixes. So you can see here, this is the post, right? This is the newsletter that I wrote. We're going to go over exactly how I structure this, but I would recommend if you need inspiration for how to structure your newsletter, feel free to read mine, right? If you read my newsletters and kind of piece together the things that I teach you and try to notice them, that's how you're going to learn much, much quicker. So here we have the newsletter. I wrote the newsletter, and then what I do, as you will learn, is I repurpose the main part of it. I write the third part of it in a way that will do well in a thread and provides a lot of value. So we'll learn how to do this, but I want to show you how I repurpose this, because we write the newsletter and then we condense it into a thread, which is right here, right? And it's a tiny bit different. And you can see that I shortened it quite a bit. Like there's only 2 tweets before we get straight into the here are the 8 steps, right? And then the 8 steps are condensed, and then boom, this can be turned into an Instagram carousel, which I'm going to post on Monday, so you won't see it yet, but I'll show you a different one. But the main thing you have to understand here is that this is not a course on content repurposing. This is a course on the content ecosystem and writing, right? You have to lock this down before you branch out to any other platform, right? You have to get the newsletter, the threads, and the tweets and your writing down before you branch out to any other platform, okay? Don't try to do it all at once. You're just going to overwhelm yourself, and then you're going to be like, oh, well, this doesn't work, when you're just not focused on one platform, building leverage there, and then transferring that leverage with the validated ideas you have, the content that will already do well, and then breaking into another platform with a strategy, right? So focus on one platform right now, whether it be LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram, but just focus your writing. Focus on getting better at writing. I think that's best done through Twitter because it forces you to condense your ideas into individual tweets, right? It forces you to write short form. It forces you to understand what the main points are that you're trying to get across in the most concise way possible. That's what makes high impact writing. So I turned the newsletter into a thread, and then I plugged it at the end, right? So now people go to this to see the full newsletter, and not only will they probably subscribe to my email list, I've gotten 5 to 10x more subscribers from me doing this system as opposed to plugging a lead magnet like my Power Planner or the 7 Days to Genius, right? So not only are they going to subscribe to your newsletter, so they get these directly to them, so they don't have to you don't have to rely on them seeing it on the timeline when you promote it. It goes straight to their email address. They see your products as well, and this is how I make all of my sales, right? So I just plug my newsletters under content, under my threads, and that is how I make sales on my products. These are my products: community, new course, cohort, right? That's how I sustain my income, is I literally just plug my newsletters once a day. And now after that, I didn't promote on that one, but where did it go? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, here's an example of one tweet that I repurposed, right? I like to visualize my big ideas. We'll get into that because it helps you come up with metaphors and explain things more simply. But I pretty much just copied the quote and included my thing, and this tweet did pretty well. I had another one, which I'll find because I really like the analogy, but this one did well. The one about, your mind is a supercomputer. Your mind is a supercomputer. Your attention is RAM, blah, blah, blah. That was pretty much in here, right? So I pretty much condensed this idea into one tweet, right? And then I condensed this into one tweet. And I think those were the main ones for this article, because tweets, I like to treat tweets, which we'll learn about. Again, there's a lot to this, but I like to treat tweets as potential content ideas, right? If my tweets do exceedingly well, then why would I not turn it into a newsletter thread and more tweets around that topic so those do even better, right? And that's how you keep a perpetual cycle of high-performing content that will lead to growth, sales, email subscribers, everything. And so that's what I did. I condensed that and, of course, plug the newsletter. And this gets so much more engagement than plugging your products. If you've ever plugged a product or service under your tweet, you understand it barely gets any engagement. This gets so much more clicks and engagement than promoting a product. And then it builds trust, and they're more likely to buy your products here because you aren't selling them out of the gate. Do you understand what I'm saying here? And even if you don't have a product, you're still building that trust and authority until you're ready to launch one. And then you just have so much content that you can continue repurposing and promoting your products. Like, it's insane. I've been going back and rewriting my newsletters with some new tips and tricks and formats. And then it's just once you have 10, 20 newsletters in place, you just go back and you rewrite them. And then you redo this entire cycle and grow the entire fucking time. It's insane. So that's that. We'll close those. And we will look at this, because the beautiful thing about newsletters is that when they're actually written as a newsletter and you send them to your list, you can base the topic of them off of either something you plan on promoting or just whatever you want, right? I have a cycle where if a cohort is coming up, because the cohort recurs, right? So the cohort happens 2-3 times a year, and 3 weeks leading up to that, that's when I start building authority and talking about topics relating to the cohort. I use the cohort for content ideas so that I can make more cohort sales. And then as that trickles down into threads and tweets, I just promote the cohort instead of the actual blog post. And that's how you make more sales, because you're building authority and you're talking about that specific thing more and more. So leading up to this course is a little bit of inception. I wanted to write a post about writing, right? And so I led off with my introduction, and you'll learn how to structure these things. But then why writing? Again, why writing? Have my little graphic to help explain things. I've turned this into a tweet, right? You can see this being a tweet in itself if I just condense it a tiny bit. But then 9 steps. So the perfect formula for a viral thread is just X steps to starting whatever. Like, we'll go over this. But then I included these, and not only is this super high value and it teaches people about writing, but it gets people ready to buy. I guarantee a ton of you watching this bought this course simply because you read this article and you purchased it at the end. Right here, 2-Hour Writer is on pre-sale, right? And so what I'm doing here is, as I lead up to a promotion, or when I want to promote something and say make more sales, then I base the topics around my money-making interest and plug things relating to that, right? From your domain of mastery, the money-making interest. So what I did from this is I took this article and I turned it into a thread, and I changed the hook, right? We'll learn how to write hooks, but that's the main thing I changed. And look how well this did. And so I condensed the newsletter into a thread. And for this one, I didn't really follow a traditional format. I kind of just wrote what I felt like writing, and it went on a bit long, but that's fine. I plug something here, keep going. You can see I have the steps. I included a little break, plug the course, and then at the end, I plug the newsletter. So same format time and time again. And that, dude, this even got more engagement than the last tweet, which is insane. You do not see this on products. Did I even get high engagement on this? I got decent engagement, but like the other ones are better. So like this will get more engagement, more clicks, more email subscribers, more sales. Just makes sense. Now, from this, literally what I did to come up with tweet ideas is I started reading through this, right? And I let ideas come to mind. And so I wrote this tweet, which did okay for me. I know, 500 likes, but I wrote this tweet, and then I plugged this. I could have plugged the newsletter, but it was getting closer to launch. It just made sense, and I used my own discretion to plug the actual course instead. And then the next one, I didn't even plug under this. But right. Wrote a tweet from that, and it did well. Do I have another one? Yes, writing is the foundation of tweets, threads, ads, newsletters, blogs, whatever. Learn to write, plug the course. Now, I want to show you one, like where I actually plugged that newsletter, because that got a good amount of pre-sale buyers. So, there's that one. Where's the other ones? Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So again, I didn't scroll far enough when I was going over these tweets, but I pretty much read through the article, right? And then I came up with this tweet: most powerful daily habit you can form, writing, blah, blah, blah. Plugged this, sends people to my list, and I get a lot of email subscribers for that. Writing is how you gain clarity. Again, this idea just sparked from the newsletter. And once you understand how to write a tweet, which we'll go over, then you just plug it under and you make sales and do whatever. And then every week I have one where I promote the letter itself when it goes out. Now, I'm sure you get the gist of what we're doing here from a very high level and the importance behind it. So the next thing is I want to show you on LinkedIn kind of what I did or what I discovered. So LinkedIn, I just copy and paste one high performing tweet over a day. And every week I've started writing my threads on LinkedIn first. Why? Because LinkedIn has a character limit and it forces me to condense the big ideas more. In the writing one, I just went on for too long. The writing thread that just went on for too long. But then when I repurposed it for LinkedIn, see, it did really well. And it was very condensed, right? So it's much, much shorter than the thread was. But then I realized, and this is perfect, is that this amount of text in LinkedIn, not only can this be pretty much copy pasted into a thread, and now the thread is better and more concise, but the amount of text that for LinkedIn allows for a post is pretty much the exact same that will fit in an Instagram carousel. So you can see this one. This got quite a bit of engagement. Where is it? See, this got 3,000. This got 11,000. And I just copy pasted copy pasted the LinkedIn post into a template in Figma. You can use Canva, you can use Photoshop. You just copy paste it into a text block and like add some italics and bolds. That's really it. And then at the end, I had the pre-sale where I pretty much copy pasted the plug that I had in here in the comments, right? I just copy pasted this and added an image of the course, told them to go there or go to my link in bio, right? And this just leads to a bunch of sales. So you can see how infinitely replicable these are. And now today I showed you all of the posts I did on writing relating to promoting the course as it's getting closer to launch. And so what I did today is, excuse me, no idea why those allergies are hitting in, but then I just copied my writing tweets all into one carousel, included some of the arguments that I've done before. See, tweets, newsletters, blogs, writing. Excuse my allergies. I don't want to have to edit this. But then I include my call to action. So I'm just promoting on all platforms from content that stems from one high quality newsletter a week. Do you see the importance of this? Do you see how this can happen? Now, of course, again, this is a course on writing. This is newsletter, threads, tweets. Once you master that and master Twitter growth, take the bonus course that's at the end of this module, then use those strategies to branch into other platforms, because writing is much, much, much more than just writing. You have to get readers. You have to grow on social media if you ever want to monetize your writing, right? So that takes time and energy to actually grow and execute on a strategy to grow. So you can't do it on all platforms. It's just not going to happen. If you want to cross post and focus all of your energy on growing on one platform, perfect. But do not try to grow on all platforms at once. Get your ideas out there, get them validated. When you have a database of high performing tweets, then you can craft a strategy for growth on another platform, post the tweets, get in good engagement on them, get shares on them, and then blow up on that platform so much faster. So in my humble opinion, spend 1 year minimum growing on one platform first, preferably Twitter. Okay? Rant over. We still have a lot to go over. I hope you're enjoying this so far. Talk soon. Okay, so now we are finally at the point where we can write or start writing our newsletter, outline our newsletter. Right now, what I like to do is I do this at the very start of my week so that as I'm consuming information, I can write things down. That'll make more sense. But one thing is that inside of the queue, there is the content ideas section. Now in mine, I have a lot of content ideas, right? So I could pick one of these, and I've written about some of these. I'm actually writing about this one right now, which I will show you. But I also want to show you another method for how, like something we talked about earlier, where you can turn your high-performing tweets into information. Nice. But let's look at some of my high-performing tweets, or just something that I want to write about, right? So let's look at these. If you're in your 20s, that would be a good one. Feel terrible. Let's see. So there's many different ways to generate ideas for this stuff. I mean, we'll talk about it in the tweet idea section, because that's how you're going to get high performing tweets in order to turn those tweets into blog articles, right? Or the headline for the blog article. So let's look for a one-liner that did pretty well that I want to dissect. People throw away philosophical advice, question everything, especially the things that people think you are crazy for questioning. I think that would make a good content, right? Question everything. So one, I'm going to copy this. You'll see why. But we're going to, at the start of each week, we're going to outline a newsletter. And the way you're going to do this is you're going to go to new, you're going to go to newsletter template, and I'm going to open this as a full page, But then you just give it a title, right? For now, give it a title. You can change it later. If you already have an idea for a headline, go ahead and write that. If you already have more ideas for what you actually want to write, go ahead and do that. If you're writing the why behind a certain topic in your domain of mastery, go ahead and do that. If you're writing about the principles about a topic in your domain of mastery, write about that. But the main thing here that you have to understand is that, again, none of this is linear, right? If I want to go and start writing it immediately, I will, and I've done that, and I'll show you areas which I've done that. But the main thing is that this is just here to outline and plan. If you already have everything in mind for what you want to write, just go straight into writing it, right? You don't have to do this. This is only to help you structure things and create more depth behind your ideas. But the reason I copy pasted the tweet is because I'm going to paste that here, because then I can include it or link it in my newsletter to add some depth and allow me to kind of write based off of that. But the next thing in quick capture is this is what I go to when I'm listening to something related to question everything, and I want to include it, right? So if I'm listening to an audiobook or I'm listening to a YouTube lecture on how you should be open-minded, then I can write down ideas that would be included in this actual article itself. And we'll go through a few of these. But another thing you can do here that is really helpful is, one, you can not only search your own tweets. So let's go to my profile. And if you haven't downloaded Twemex already, I've linked it a few times, I believe. You just go to twemex.com. And then when you're on your profile, not only can you look at your most recent tweets, but I can search for tweets that I want to include. The most enlightening is always asking a question before responding, reacting, or deciding. That one's good. So I will pop this in here. And of course, you have to have a lot of tweets in order to do this. This just gets easier with time, as everything in life does. But let's see. What can I do about it? We could talk about reframes, right? So now we're starting to generate ideas for the actual post and what it could be about. So I could talk about 5 reframes to expand your mind. That's just an idea from what I got from the tweets. And of course, you can also look at your competitors or your tribe of mentors accounts, right? So let's say I like Naval. I actually use Naval's quotes quite a bit. I link his tweets because he just says things so freaking well. So let's see what he says about question. The most important question is not how do I get what I want? It's what do I want? That's interesting. The older the question, the older the answers. Damn. So these are all pretty old. Let's look at open-minded. Let's say critical. I'm trying to look for critical thinking. Yeah, there's none here, right? But then you capture these over time, where it's you're going to have a database of tweets that you can look for. If something comes to mind about questioning everything inside of a book, then you can do that. I actually have one inside of, I'm writing this in the wrong place, but let's go to my writing hub. Right, and this is just an example. But I know that in the queue, inside of YouTube video notes, 65 principles, I can search in here, question, yeah. So I could copy and paste this into my research, and I could just put actualized 65 principles so I know where it's from. Include those there. There's no idea too sacred not to question. Question the things. These can be used as firepower for transitions in the actual thing. So we have those. That's good. Another thing you could do is look up quotes on questioning everything. Who's this from? Question everything, learn something, answer nothing. Mind that questions everything, unless strong enough to bear the weight of its ignorance, risks questioning itself and being engulfed in doubt. That one's solid. Question everything from Newton. Question everything, even if it represents generations of conventional wisdom. That's pretty good. Don't just teach your children to read, teach them to question what they read, teach them to question everything. So you could do deeper research onto this, and that's the thing. If you plan on giving credit to people, you can research and pull inspiration from anywhere. The books you read, really, quite literally anything. And then we still have a lot of information that we can go off of, but let's go back to this. So we have enough for research. We can add more to quick capture as things come to mind throughout the week, right? That's the purpose of this, is you add things as they come to mind on your walks, on other things throughout the week. Why does this work? Because you have set an intention to write a newsletter. When you have set an intention, every single life experience becomes firepower for that. It becomes energy. It becomes fuel. So when you're reading a book, and even if it's something random, right? Like you're hearing about dopamine, it may trigger the right thought process to give you the perfect idea, and that default mode network, when you're zoomed out in inward focus cognition, that will give you that big idea to put in here. They'll just come to you, right? And that's a skill that needs to be practiced. So after this, we go to planning. So this is where things get good. This is where we start pulling together an actual argument that we can get to. Now, as you can tell, if you've taken the 7 Days to Genius challenge, or if you're writing something that has been included in your, in your mind, right? Like if you want to write about the internet opening up the opportunity to do more, then you already have some of the problems, goals, advice, experiences, all that stuff written down. And then this would be a great topic to write about because you want to make it your own. You want to talk about it forever. You want people to associate this topic with you. So you're going to blast it long form, medium form, short form, get it in people's heads, right? With the content ecosystem. Now, since we're doing this around question everything, we're starting from scratch, but you don't have to. And that's the fun behind this, right? So who am I writing to? In this case, it will be people that want to get more out of life. This is a bit vague, but we'll start there, right? The topic is questioning everything, or learning, or open-mindedness, and then perspectives. So perspectives around question everything. This is difficult to come up with unless you have something at the top of mind. That's one other thing, is that all of these are optional. You do not need to fill out all of these. They're just here to give you ideas. And then when you start writing, actually writing, more ideas will come to mind, right? And this is like, some people may be thinking like, oh, this is so drawn out. And it's like, okay, if it's so drawn out, why does it only take me 2 hours a week if I just go through and write it? And do you want to settle and be a commodity writer, right? You have to put effort into this. You have to be creative. And that's how you stand out. And that's how you get more eyes and traction on your profile, right? So perspectives related to question everything is, there's like the religious perspective, or we'll just say religious perspective, where you must accept our dogma and ideology. You have the college, or let's just say like you have the school perspective, where you like do what I say, get your homework done, and try to get good grades. And so there's just a bunch of different perspectives on like being closed-minded and accept what you are told is true, right? So then goals related to the like questioning everything. I'm going to actually remove this. that doesn't add much clarity. And so you should see it like this. But your goals. So this is not only goals pertaining to where other people want to be, but they're also pertaining to where you want to be, because that's how you're going to attract people and be able to help the right people, is they're going to have similar goals as you, similar values, goals, priorities, etc. That's why people follow a personal brand, right? So your goals related to questioning everything is that you want to do what you enjoy for a living. Actualize your potential. Do the impossible and not end up mediocre, right? We can start there. So you can see things coming together, and like this alone, you could start writing an article on, or even tweets on, right? This is just good starting points for tweets. And then if you look up a tweet structure in Tweet Hunter and you switch some words out and you make it your own and you add a few lines, boom, you've got a great tweet written. Now, the big problem, or just problems associated with questioning everything, or people that want to get more out of life, is kind of the topic. Questioning everything, learning, open-mindedness, they're all the same, right? And we're writing a lot, so it doesn't have to be extremely focused. So big problem is that, one, bad common perspectives, close-mindedness, not knowing that you can achieve more because you can't see it. Big problem. Settling for a comfortable life when that is the greatest risk of them all. And now another thing you can see is that I've written a tweet on this before. I know that there's quotes relating to this. I know I have so many tweets relating to like self-improvement, actualizing your potential. I can go and I can look those up and I can add them to my research, so that way I can add more depth and more spacing in my actual newsletters themselves by including those tweets, right? So objections to open-mindedness is pretty much the same as perspectives, right? There's some crossover here, and we don't have to fill this one out. And objections, for those that don't know, is pretty much like when you give someone a piece of advice, what do they say in return to retort it and kind of write it off? And that's kind of the topic of the newsletter as a whole. So objections itself is the objection. But benefits from overcoming the problems or achieving those goals. This one's personal, but like this one just comes to mind for me, is good dopamine, right? Good dopamine and less cheap dopamine. I've read books on survival, so it's like you are wired, your psyche is wired for survival. This just shows you the importance of constantly consuming information with intention, so that, and taking notes on it, so that you can have it ready to pull out of your like pool of creativity, and you connect the dots via newsletters, right? So your psyche is wired for survival, and I could come up with an argument for that, so I'm going to leave it at that and write more about it. Big benefit. We'll stop right there. But personal experience. So I could talk about my health experience and being dogmatic about certain diets. What else is there? Learning a little bit about online business and thinking that I'll just use freelancing as freelancing was the best option for beginners. And we'll start there. We have a lot of good information here. So steps, methods, frameworks, or lists. So this is what's going to be included at the bottom of your newsletter, and is going to form the foundation of your threads, like actionable threads, actionable tweets. You could make like a list tweet with these, or other posts like that. And actionable advice is just how you grow as a beginner and how you provide massive values by giving people steps, methods, frameworks, ways to change human behavior, which is what we're aiming after for here. So steps to becoming more open-minded. And this is where things get, like, you have to be creative here, because you have to research and create your own steps or frameworks, right? So I could create a framework, which is like a mental model or something where it's like, okay, when I catch myself, we can talk about this. Here's the steps. Become aware of your limiting beliefs. That's step 1. Step 2 is to pause and determine their rationality. And I'm just coming up with this off the top of my head, right? And that's how you be unique. You're not trying to copy someone else. It does take time. It does take conscious thought, critical thinking to come up with these things. Like, okay, what's the next step? What would I do? What advice would I give myself to stop being closed-minded and to start questioning everything? And right here, we'll actually say question their rationality. What's the next thing? Reframe to a question their rationality. And then how about, research the opposite perspective with an open mind. And then experience those things directly to determine whether they are true or false. We could even throw in like self-experimentation and treating your life as a science project. I talk about that a lot. And again, this gets easier with time. I've been doing this for a long time. But you can come up with your own, and you can start very basic. Don't be afraid to start basic, because people still need that basic advice. They really do. And I mean, there's a reason you go on Twitter and you read basic advice all day and you enjoy reading it. It's a good reminder. So why not join in on that? Next is the big idea. So the big idea in this is pretty much a 1-sentence summary. So if you're writing based off of a discovery you made, that discovery is the big idea, right? And you're kind of dissecting it even further here so you can flesh it out and have your own philosophy or way of explaining it, and steps, frameworks, methods, whatever. And this can be a list as well, right? Like if we're talking about questioning everything, it could be a list on 10 things to question in your life, right? So if it's 10 things to question in your life, let's just create a space here. So like 10, let's do 5. 5 things to question in your life. Your beliefs, and then you can go on to talk about the why when you're actually writing it. Your beliefs, your relationships, your fitness, your quality of life, and your purpose, right? So getting people to start thinking about things, and then you can include a little bit of things here that might actually do better than something else. And it could be like for a different topic that isn't about questioning everything. It could be like 5 habits, because habits aren't a step-by-step list. They're not a framework. It's like 7 habits that'll change your life, right? Or for frameworks, I mean, hell, you can turn the steps into a framework. So I could turn this into the question everything framework, or the open-mindedness. I'm trying to think. The mental expansion method. Something like that. You have fun with it and you create your own names for it, because that's another thing to think about, is that think of like a framework that you love. So I know there's the Eisenhower matrix, which is about like productivity and like how you organize your priorities in each quadrant of the matrix, but that's just made up, right? It's like you draw things out, which is where visualization comes into play, super powerful, but you draw things out and you start to like piece together puzzles, and you're like, oh, this makes sense, oh, this doesn't make sense. And eventually with the Eisenhower matrix, he just came up with that and named it. So if you want to make your own, on a framework that you really like, then you take that concept, you draw it out, you change things around, and then you rename it to make it your own. I've done this with a lot of big ideas in books. Like, this is more of a concept than a framework, but in The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle calls something the pain body, which is like partially the ego, but how the ego makes you feel. And I renamed that for my book as the virus. Now, why? Because I talk about life in terms of a game. And so the virus, I can, like, metaphors and stuff helps with all of that stuff. Like, I can explain it as, like, it's infected our brain, it's in our programming, and we have to deprogram and then reprogram with our own, like, patch or our own software that we put into our head, right? So that's where this stuff gets really creative. So the big idea, back to it, behind all of this is that, let's see, I would say a one-sentence summary of this is like, the good life is as simple as asking one question and letting it trigger more. It's just an example, right? This is, again, you don't have to make these perfect. Now, with visualizations, this is where I really like to get creative, and I like to draw them in a notebook. This really, really, really freaking helps. Okay, get a notebook, get something that you can draw out the big idea on, right? So if I were to look at this, the big idea is that one question can lead to other questions. So I can write out what I want to draw here, where it's like, and you don't only do this for the big idea. You can do it for the actual steps. You can do it for the 5 things to question about your life, like in a little matrix where it's like at the top it says 5 things to question in your life, and then it's like priorities, like your beliefs, your relationships, your fitness, your quality of life. And then that just gives you more depth and a cool graphic to include in your newsletter, on Instagram, as your featured image, all of that other stuff. Talk about, you could create like a visual for open-mindedness, like what it means, or like a comparison between closed-mindedness and open-mindedness. Another thing I really like to do is visualize my tweets. So one of the most powerful questions in the world, those are okay. But see, they have to be a fit. They have to give you that inspiration. So none of these do that for me. So I would rather visualize the big idea here to include more depth in my newsletters. And I visualize something for every newsletter. And if you follow me on Instagram, you understand that I include that. That gives my profile more depth and variation, and gives me my own unique style because it fits my brand. So the good life is as simple as asking one question and letting it trigger more. So visualizing this, you could have like a negative thought, and then that leads down 2 paths, which is questioning or reacting. And then this one, the path stops, and then this one, the path continues through other questions until you reach a positive outcome. And you can symbolize this however you want. Like if I were to draw something up right now, this video's kind of dragging on, but this is so important. This is like the most important aspect of all of your writing, is outlining it and letting it sit during the week. That's another huge thing with this, is that it's just not a one and done. You have to add to it throughout the week. You have to munch on it, think about it, contemplate, watch YouTube videos, like watch one YouTube video a week relating to the topic that you're trying to write about, note ideas in there, and just get your ideas, like get your brain to become just an idea machine where you're putting stuff in, you're popping stuff out. You have to match your consumption with your writing, or writing with your consumption. So, please give me some time as I draw up a shitty drawing. But you have like a negative thought, and then it goes down two paths. So you have two paths, and you have, what was it? You have a reaction, and then you could lead to like a stop, and then you have a question, and then that could go to like two more questions. Bear with me. But then those could go even more. And then I'm just going to finish up this drawing, but then they can all connect into a star. And of course, this is just like symbolism. But then you can draw this so much better. But hopefully you can see that, where you have the negative thought at the top, and then it branches into a reaction and a question, and then the reaction stops there. The question goes to another question, two more questions, and then two more questions, and then to a star, which you can make it better, right? Like spend some time with this, spend like 30 minutes drawing something out. And when I tell you that this will give you the perfect like analogy for your actual article and a better way of simplifying and creating metaphors, analogies, the things that really catch people's attention, this is the way to do it. I promise. I can't explain it aside from you're going to be drawing something out, you're going to scratch one iteration of it off, and then you're going to draw another thing, and you're going to be like, okay, this is good. And then you're going to want to write about it and explain the graphic, right? That's where the good writing comes in, is when you explain how the graphic works, right, in one of your sections of your newsletter. And then you can include that in your tweets and everything else. So trust me on this. Do this for one of your articles, visualize it, and then come back. And when you start writing, that is when things get juicy. Okay. That was 30 minutes, and we have more to go over. So hope you're enjoying. All right, so now it comes time to actually start writing, or at least outlining a bit more. Because what I like to do after we filled out planning, research, quick capture, and when you're ready to start writing, you come in here, and this is where you outline the key points that you can start to fill in with your arguments, right? So in the intro, I always like to include a personal experience. Again, you'll probably have to write your newsletter as you go through this section of the actual curriculum a few times until you get the hang of it and can start to do it the way that you like, right? It's imitate, then innovate. You kind of have training wheels, and then you take the training wheels off, and you struggle for a bit, and then you get better. You practice. Okay, so key points and outlines. So the intro, in this case, will be health and being dogmatic. So who am I talking to? People that want to get more out of life. This is kind of similar to what I've been talking about a lot, but for the sake of this, I would talk about, I could say something like, I've always been into health and fitness, especially if this is a part of my domain of mastery, health and fitness, or just well-being in general. I've always been into health and fitness. I remember when Jeez, I'm sorry, guys. This didn't even start happening until today, but I remember when I want to set the scene a bit more. I started out by watching certain YouTubers, and I'm just outlining here. Like, I can go in and fill in this and make it longer in the future. I started by watching certain YouTubers. I learned about flexible dieting, tracked my macros. And the thing with this is, remember this, right? If I don't talk about health a lot, I need to give people context. I need to teach need to tell them about it from a beginner's mindset, right? I can't assume that they know what I'm talking about relating to health. So I'm going to have to explain briefly what flexible dieting is, explain briefly what macros are, and then I can go into, after years of doing this, I came across Ancestral Health, and I'll just keep it short, and started eating and posting about raw liver and the benefits behind this. Now, why is this important? I can go into the next section, which would be on giving context. We talk about giving context or painting a picture of a metaphor or something like that, right? So we're talking about something that I can conceptualize and use the visual behind. I could give it some interesting name, but let's just say closed-mindedness is a disease, right? And hell, that even I could name this, I could say, if we were still in COVID times, I could be the real virus that you should be afraid of, as the headline. And then going into this, I can pretty much look up here. I can talk about the problems of closed-mindedness. I can include the visual, and I can explain the visual. So I could say include and explain visual. And in this as well, I could imply goals. Crap. And then I could include some of the goals. And that could actually lead into, so let's take this, let's delete that, and then include the goals under why is it important, right? And then that will lead into closed-mindedness being a disease. Include and explain the visual, and could also include the common perspectives here and there, how, so this could actually, so now what we're going to do, we'll use that here, and then we always end with actionable advice or steps or things or just a list that we can repurpose, right? So we're going to use, where is it? 5 things. And these can be better, right? You can change what these are and come up with your own. So highlight those, boom. And what do you know? You have a fleshed out article, right? And it's extremely unique. Nobody can replicate this. And if they do, it's copying, right? This is attributed to you. You're going to be the go-to person for them learning about closed-mindedness, them questioning everything. And you could even talk about right here, the importance of questioning everything, and then include the benefits. And this is just if you want to get really long on I love long form content. It's been a game changer for my brand, and I love writing it, but you could keep this short and concise as well if you wanted to. And that's probably how it will be at the start if you don't have all of this firepower like I do. Now, what's going to happen is if you hit a roadblock with this, especially in the future, is you're going to go to your writing hub, you're going to go here, and you're going to use these to create unique perspectives, right? Because what you can do is if you don't know how to transition, or you don't know what to include here, you don't know what to include here, then you can go to your research, you can look at your tweets, you can include the tweets, you can include a quote, you can use one of these, and these can be applied to anything really, right? So life enjoyment. So the internet has opened up the opportunity to do what you enjoy. You don't have to suffer anymore when creating your own career path. So you could talk about being open about the internet and the opportunity it presents. And then boom, you have an entire section ready to go. And as I talk about how you structure those sections is with the poll, the perspective, and the punchline, right? That's kind of how you structure them. But at the same time, you can use AIDA, which is attention, interest, desire, action, or PAS, problem, amplify, solution. So you have the problems. You can just start with a problem to start a new section of your newsletter. You can go on to explain or amplify that problem with like what's holding them back from hitting their goals. Maybe a personal experience comes into that. All of these different things. I could even use this personal experience about like to start off this article. You understand what I'm saying? Everything that you have written so far throughout this entire course can be used as building blocks for any article if you understand how to transition and can see how to transition and see how you can connect that dot and the dots that need to be connected in between in order for you to connect those dots, right? So again, I want to emphasize practice here. Practice, practice, practice. It really helps. My first newsletters, garbage, absolute garbage, until I started practicing this method and creating my own system, and it got much easier, okay? So don't beat yourself up too much at first because it's not going to come easily. Your newsletters will be better than others and more unique because of this, but just know that it does take time. Just know that, okay? You have my word. But the next thing when it comes to editing, so now what you do after writing is you open up something like Hemingway. I have mine open right here, and you just start writing, right? Like I can't really help you with this part because I'm not going to write a newsletter on here. It takes an entire week. I'm just not going to do it. It doesn't make sense. And we're going to go over some of my favorite newsletters up here. But then you open Hemingway or Tweet Hunter or Google Docs, whatever you want to use, and then you start writing. I could literally start out with this, and then you just draft. You literally flood the page with all of your insights, and then once you have a really rough draft, you can go through it. You can turn on the edit mode in Hemingway. You can start to cut things down. Don't save. And you can come through here. So this is your checklist for editing, right? When you're ready to come through Hemingway itself and start editing, you read through these. So can you create a visual to help explain the process? We already did that, so yes. Are your sentences concise, grammar corrected, and understandable? So read through your thing and see if it's concise, see if it's understandable, see if it makes sense. Do you stick to the main topic, reduce going on tangents, and deliver what is promised in the headline? So the next one, does your hook target a big pain point or promise a big benefit while reducing the perceived effort of implementing your advice? Will your message be well received by the audience that will be seeing it? Is your writing separated with headlines, tweets, quotes, graphics, or other things? Do your sentences vary in length and impact? Does it read like music? Do you write to a fifth grader through metaphors and simplified ways of understanding? And then repurposing, so you can come up with thread, caption, LinkedIn hook ideas, tweet ideas for actual tweets. And this is what I would do when it comes time to actually write the thread or the caption or the LinkedIn post. And we'll go over how to write good threads. But the last thing you need to know is the headline. Now, there's a lot of debate about this in the writer's world, where it's like some people say write the headline first, so your writing can be focused around that. Some people say I like to write the headline after everything, because what a headline includes, and we'll learn this more later when we go over like writing hooks, because that's just a better way of explaining how to write a headline, is that you need to talk about the problem. You need to grab attention. You need to make it seem easy. There needs to be relevance. It needs to be relatable. And after you write all of this, then you come back and create the headline, right? And this will become easier when you learn about leveraging Twitter threads, because that is easier to conceptualize what makes a good hook or headline, right? So with that, start writing. Let's actually go over some of my favorite newsletter. So this one we've already kind of gone over, but I want to, how do I put this? I want to just go over like what happened here, and I want you to understand what's going on. So personal experience. I've noticed one pattern in all these people. What pattern? Focus, blah, blah, blah. I just add on some things that like I have learned and that I've studied and that I want to write about, right? And then I really like this quote. I have this in my Readwise. It's saved from the book Flow, and so I include it here, right? And then this sets the scene. So my intention with creating this newsletter is that I was reading this book, and controlled consciousness or contents of consciousness really clicked with me. I'm like, that made me understand something new. I need to write about this because I love talking about focus, and it just made sense to write something about it. So I started writing, and then I have to give context to content of consciousness, right? And so I give the metaphor of RAM. And this came after creating this visual where I talk about your attention being split and then being focused and fulfilled, because that's what this quote was made from, or I made the visual from this quote. And so I had to explain the quote in a way that made sense, and I'm good with computers, and so computers came to mind. And I'm like, that kind of, it works the same as RAM, or at least I can make it happen like RAM. And I've heard this so many different times where it's like 126 bits of information and clogging your performance and slowing things down. And I'm like, okay, yeah, RAM, computer RAM makes sense to have a metaphor there. And then I keep writing, and then 8 steps to reclaiming your focus. So then I just created these out of nowhere. It's like, okay, what would the steps be if I created them, or if I were giving myself advice? So you can go through and read this. It's all on my blog. But that's what I did, right? It makes sense. And then we already saw how I condensed this into a thread in tweets. And then we looked at this one as well. But you can see here, personal experience. Ever since I can remember, I've had the goal of doing what I love for a living. Isn't that what everyone wants? That's kind of funny because we were brainstorming that earlier. So maybe that was just at the top of my head. I talked about that. Now, why writing? So this is more so educational, right? Because most of my audience, I don't talk about writing too much. And I have to put myself in the shoes of the reader, where will they understand? Like, why should they care about writing if they're not even following me for writing? So this is where I have to educate them, right? That's option number 3 that we go over in this module, is that you have to educate them and give them context on why writing is important. Why should they care about writing? What is writing? How do you write? What, how, why, right? And so I give my unique perspective behind why writing, and it's pretty much because everything is writing, right? And I actually got this from someone else's tweet, or at least it was some rendition of it. I forget who it was, but they're like, this kind of writing is writing, images are writing, and so I created my own, and it just made sense. And then 9 steps to starting a one-person writing business. So I just made these up, and that's really it. It's all about making it up. You don't have to be perfect first time around. And again, you guys saw how I condense these into threads and tweets, right? So the next one, this one was really fun for me. This one was actually a redo of one of my previous newsletters on the Fill Empty Use framework. And this one I wrote because of a high-performing tweet, the Fill Empty Use, which I include right here, right? That one did really well. So I'm like, I'm going to turn this into a framework, Fill Empty Use, and write about it. And it worked out really well. So introduction, personal experience. I've always had some form of aversion toward Western work culture. 8-hour work weeks, high-pressure environments, blah, blah, blah. And this is while I was reading the book Rest. So again, another thing that is extremely important is to pretty much read and watch YouTube videos, flood your brain with the ideas that you want to write about and that you enjoy learning about and that you enjoy distilling and that you potentially have experience with. So you have more firepower to explain those things that you have experience with. So I pulled some of this stuff from the book and just worded it like I wrote it in my own words. But then I had a quote from the book that I was reading, and I used a metaphor or a comparison here where to help people understand more. And I know that a lot of people that are into health follow me. So I wrote about how focus and the gym are kind of the same. You don't go to the gym for 8 hours a day and expect to focus 8 hours a day. Like, you have to recover. You have to emphasize recovery. And so then my 3-step framework for productivity, and I go over each part. Fill your mind. There's subsections on how to do it. I went really long on this one. Empty your mind. And see how I'm plugging my stuff throughout here, right? 7 Days to Genius, 2-Hour Writer. And so I'm making sales along the way as people are going through this. But so another thing, we talked about how newsletters just like are better to plug, but people also share the newsletters. They say, oh my God, this is so good, and it gets more readers. It's not like someone does that for a lead magnet or a sales page. Sometimes, maybe, but it's just much more likely with newsletters to have more word of mouth marketing, right? So then use your mind. You can see what I'm doing here. But then I created the visual as well. Just had some fun with it. Where is it? There's a visual somewhere. I guess I didn't include the visual. I'm pretty sure I visualized, yeah, you see this right here? I visualized the tweet. And I didn't include it here because I included the tweet. So I visualized this, and then the actual featured image of this post is like these 3 bars. But the next one, this one was really fun to write. This is the newsletter that really solidified the importance of visualization into my head. Even though it's just like a graph, like I started drawing things out, just messing around with it, scratching things out, redrawing, and it formed the entire basis of this newsletter. So, personal experience. This past month, I've realized a common theme in my life and the life of many others: obsession. Going through, and now this is concept, right? So there was like the context, there's metaphors, there's analogies, there's education in the middle section, and this one was a concept of my own. So the future career path is what I named this visual. And then I went on to kind of back it up and provide an argument for that. And so then from this visual, I can literally just break down each part of it for the newsletter, right? So pursuing your curiosity, which is curiosity. And then medium and the message, I talk about media and code. So media, code. Brutal combo, build distribution, then build whatever you want. So you look at this, you got distribution, and throughout the newsletter, I'm talking about the relationships between all of these. That's what a lot of writing is relativism and relationships. Like, okay, here's one sentence. How do the subjects of that one interest, like, how are they impacted? What's their relationship with something else? How can you write about that, right? And that's a bit more abstract. It doesn't really help. You'll realize this. But then we keep going, making a fortune. So then I just give like actionable advice on like how they can actually start a business and start building leverage. So that one was really fun. How to finally stop caring what other people think. Again, personal experience. As a kid, video games fascinated me. Call of Duty, Modern Warfare. Why we become obsessed. So I decided to educate people on obsession. What is obsession? What does obsession mean in the lens that I want to talk about it in? And see, I'm including quotes throughout here that I've collected. I'm using a lot of stuff here. These were the ones where I was like super long and not really focused. But you can see where I'm going with this, where like I was piecing a lot of things together. I heard someone say, like, you create your own reality, you operate within your own reality. That's the key to happiness, right? So I'm pairing a lot of things together here and like noticing the patterns, noticing the connections, and then bringing them together here in my own way. So when I think of the game of life, I decided to visualize it. And this is the reality that you create, or the little world of your own, and how you get there. So the way you do that is like vision, goals, priorities, creating your own character. This one dragged on and on. if you want to go through and dissect these, I would encourage you to just go to my site, look at a random article and just start reading, right? That's how you learn to write and read, is by actually doing it. So I hope this was helpful. I want you to start writing, because the sooner you start writing, the sooner you'll learn and you'll make those connections, because you can't, how do I put, this is another abstraction that I want to write about soon, but it's like, if you're right here and the discovery that you're trying to make is right here, but you haven't taken action to light up the dots closer to that, then you're not going to see it. It's not going to register in your awareness. I talk about the unknown a lot. It's uncomfortable to take action, but you only see, like, think of holding a candle and it lights up a bit of space in front of you, but it only lights up so far. You can't see the potential discovery that you're going to make unless you start moving forward and actually writing until you discover it, and then you're like, oh shit, I leveled up, or whatever it may be. So start writing. What is up, my friends? So we are talking about threads. I showed you some good thread examples from other people, but I want to go over some of my threads and the thought process behind them and kind of clear the air a bit, because we've talked about newsletters, we've talked about threads, we've talked about tweets, or we're going to talk about tweets, and we're eventually going to iterate on our own content creation process in one of the last modules. But I just want to show you this because inspiration, examples is just a good way of explaining things and making connections to the theory and concepts that we've been learning. So here I had just an idea, right? This came from reading the book Flow, because consumption is important. And he talked about his flow model, right? So that gave me an idea of, okay, yeah, people aren't doing things like, I wanted to paint this example. It was a cool concept, and so I wrote a thread on it, and I gave him credit for that. So the whole thing, if you were bored, anxious, or losing the spark of passion you had, there are 3 solutions, right? Straight to the point, big problems here. I like to do things in rules of 3, where it's like 1, 2, 3. I do that in tweets a lot just because it flows. There's rhythm to it. And then there are 3 solutions. So there's a number which catches some attention. I'm kind of calling them out by saying, if you are bored, that's my target audience with this thread specifically. And there are 3 solutions. So it's kind of implying that it's easy to get the result. But then you can start to see here how I structure these individually. These can be retweeted on their own, right? And liked on their own. This is what makes threads different from other styles of posts, is that these are all individual tweets in themselves, and you should try to make them make sense on their own. So we go through, I paint the picture, I start talking about the problem, but I'm not just attacking the problem, right? I'm painting a picture. How can I get this across in a way that makes people realize their faulty perspective? Right? So I keep going down, and you can always research this from my profile or anyone's profile just by searching it with Twemex. And so we go down, you can see how these are all well structured, spaced apart. I include a graphic here and explain it. We go over, I give examples. So again, examples, metaphors, quotes, other references. That's how you start to piece together a more credible argument that will stand out from people that are just listing things off, right? And so we go through here, a simple call to action. You can do these however you want, but thank you for reading. If you enjoyed this thread, help pass it on by retweeting the first tweet. And in Tweet Hunter, there's a way to do this where if you were to write a thread, then you'd like write the hook, and then you write the thread like this. Pretty simple. But then it says down here, add tweet to insert the first tweet of your thread. So in the last one, where you say, thank you for reading, please retweet. That's spelt wrong. But then you just go like that, tweet, and then it includes the first tweet so they can go back to the top and retweet it for you, right? Because getting more eyes on it is important. And then you can go on to like plug your tweet or your thread and then schedule it, right? And this is all Tweet Hunter. If you're just making this in Twitter, then you're going to have to send the entire thread and then create another tweet linking the first tweet. Okay. And so you can see I did that here, and then I plugged my lead magnet because I'm talking about goals. I'm talking about my vision. I'm talking about things that I've already built out and built authority on with this stuff, right? So we'll go through these, but they're pretty similar. I made this one from a video and got a lot of traffic to my video, but 7 books that will change your life that you've probably never heard of. So I'm making it more readable and attention grabbing by adding the parentheses, so kind of guiding readers' eyes through it and keeping it fresh in a sense. 7 is kind of my number. I use 7 a lot. I don't know why, it just always works. Books that will change your life is highly relevant to almost everyone, right? And it's highly relevant to everyone, but it's also attracting the people that value self-improvement. So they belong in my audience, right? So going through here, each tweet is a tweet, or at least the main ones. And so I structure it: 1, the power of now. Give a bit of context. 2, 3, context. 4, context. 5, context. See? And the next one, 7 ways to change your life in 6 months or less. Because this did so well, I knew I could just give some advice. And they did pretty similarly, right? And so then I give the strong advice. And once you go over tweet writing and you practice tweet writing, this becomes much easier. And it's also a practice of tweet writing. So you just get better and better with all of this over time. But you can start to see what I mean here. So this did well just because it's simple and it's working right now on Twitter. So very similar, 13 harsh truths that will set you on a better path than a 4-year degree. So I'm making a comparison. I have specific numbers. Harsh truths, people want to hear harsh truths. What will it do? There's a transformation implied. Better than a 4-year degree. So it doesn't take them very long. It's implying low effort. And that's really it. 1, 2, these just always work. The lists, threads always work. 3-habit morning routine that will build positive momentum into the rest of your day. So same thing. We can go through these all day, but it's replicable once you just get the structure down and understand hook and thread writing. This one is based on my story. I do recommend everyone write and refine their own story thread with time, because your story is an asset for your brand. It really is. It's how you relate to people on a deeper level and let people get to know you. But it's one of those things like your authority content and not really the things that you're coming up with at the top of your head. These are the things that you can repost every 6 months and make it better, right? So whether it be authority content, because there's only so many things you can say and so much you can educate people on pertaining to the basics or the principles. So you write that one time, and then when it comes time to promote, or when you just want to have another thread to write, or you have something new that you want to add on to your story or authority building content, then you can post it again in a new light, in a sense, and just minor changes. You can repost anything, especially when you're gaining new followers and they haven't seen it. That's even more reason to repost your best stuff. And so this one was good. I used a visual on this one. Again, it's just about getting the hook right and then just writing about it. And if it's good, it's good. And you have to get retweets on it. So we can go through these all day, but you can come through and search for these if you want. This one's an example of a tweet that consistently did well for me. It's 4 hours of focused work in 6 months will change your life, whatever. So I turned it into a thread and gave more depth behind it. And that would set me apart as opposed to other people who are just repeating the same thing over and over. So the next one, it's still the same thing for me. Once I found the way that consistently got likes, that's when I just milked it. Now, this one did less well because I'm targeting a more niche group of people, right? 1-person business model, not many people know of that. Multi-6-figure, not many people will believe that. And that's really it. It's not super enticing, and it's not extremely highly relevant. That's why it didn't do as well. but it did lead to, did I sell something at the bottom? I'm not really sure, but this would make me more sales than a generic growth tweet. So this one did really well. How I turn one piece of content per week into a lot of money. So I have authority here and a random number. Creative income, again, more authority, right? Like this makes people want to understand what information I have that they don't. And it implies a transformation because this is something that they want. Make sense? So the rest of these, you guys have probably seen these, honestly, because these two threads are what I did to promote and establish my authority leading into this cohort, right? I've already talked about these things before, but there's no reason for me to waste such valuable information when I'm not planning on promoting something, right? So the authority stuff stays for when you are either promoting something or you're trying to actually establish authority. Again, with this one's pretty similar, and I was just following like a popular format that a lot of people were following at the time. So this is another reason to actually immerse yourself in Twitter and see what threads do well and then emulate that, or at least take the idea and the reasons that they are doing well and then create your own version with an idea and your own perspective on those things. So the last one, this was a while ago, so it kind of sucked, and I'm talking about a marketing strategy and people relating to product sales and high paying clients, and that's not a super beginner market. It's beginner, but it's niche in a sense for people that want to make more product sales or land high ticket clients, right? So it's just an example, and you come back and you iterate over time. If a thread doesn't do well, oh well, what are you going to do? You're going to write another one the next week. And then after 3 years and 157 weeks, you're not going to care if the last one, if one of the threads or 5 of the threads or 50 of the threads didn't do very well, right? So remember to maintain perspective, but it's a general breakdown of threads. Write some threads. All right, my friends, welcome to one of the last videos. It's unfortunate that I'm going to have to leave you with this, but I'm going to leave you with some fire, some super simple fire that should change the game for you, especially if you are a beginner. So this has helped myself and my clients quite a bit. This is what I did at the beginning, and this is a great way to come up with content ideas when you are just starting out. Now, here I have Medium. We talked about this before and how you can kind of install it with Readwise and highlight the things inside the actual article, and that gets exported to Notion so you can look over those. The other thing is that this can be used to, one, study good headlines, right? These are ways, so the 9 books that completely change the way I see the world, 5 things happy couples don't do, 22 essential apps I use daily, 5 remarkable things that successful people do, create systems, not goals, and get 99% of things done. It's just good to read headlines that stick out. Now on Medium, one, it costs like $5 a month. You don't have to be on Medium if you don't want to, but this is where I got a lot of my content ideas when I was just starting out. I would read something like this, and maybe that's what made me understand that lists are so important, is I would come on Medium and I would read something, I would see how it was structured, I'd read the good writing, and I'd take note of the things that really stuck out to me, what hit me, the things that are bold, the quotes that they include that I can copy and paste to the queue, right? You're reading information from people that have already synthesized what we're doing. Like what we're doing is we're synthesizing information into our Notion dashboard, and then we're taking that and we're turning it into our own article and including quotes and different things like that. When you can find all of these and get great ideas from something like Medium, right? There have been many times where I'm reading a Medium article and something sticks out to me and it sparks a content idea, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to write a tweet on that. So sometimes when I'm just out of ideas, I will go to like open up Tweet Hunter, and then I'll read through a post and I'll just wait for a content idea to come to me. I don't write the things that they say here. I read through it and then I think about it for a bit. think about it for a bit, contemplate on it. I'm like, okay, where does that lead? When have I experienced this? And then start writing just something. And then eventually it transforms into a good tweet. That turns into a blog article, whatever it may be, right? So this is just one way to do things, but it's a good way to generate content ideas that you know are going to do well because they're already doing well on another platform. That is the point with all of this, right? So the same thing goes for Tweet Hunter. When you look up someone's tweet inside of Tweet Hunter like this, and you get eyes on the actual content, you know that it's going to do well because it's already done well, right? Now, this is where things get very tricky because I've seen many people copy my stuff, like just word for word. They'll just copy paste it and post it, and then I call them out, and then they quit forever because everyone dogpiles them. It's like, just don't copy people. Like, come up with something on your own. Like, use these as inspiration. Do not copy. I don't know how many fucking times I have to say that because people keep doing it and think that they're going to get away with it. They're not. And I'm not only saying this in terms of me, it's only happened a couple times in terms of me, but I've quite literally seen full out wars and strategies created to get accounts taken down because they copied someone. One tweet. Don't do it. People will dogpile you. You will get canceled at some point in your career. Don't do it. So back to it. So that's one way you can generate content ideas is because, one, when you sign up for Medium, you get to choose the interests that you like, right? And then it will show you those things, and I can even click here and filter, and like there's ones where it's like, yeah, some of them aren't going to be very good, but that's the reason you come through here to get ideas for certain things. 8 lessons I learned from Quincy Jones on life and creativity. That's pretty good, but you can come in here, look at the lessons, and even turn one of those lessons into your own piece of content, right? Now, Medium's good and all, but YouTube is 10 times better for me. So what I do is I have my mentors or just the channels that I like to consume that talk about the same things as me, right? If you're not consuming the things or constantly learning about the things you are trying to master, then it just doesn't make sense. Like, what are you doing? Learn about the things you're trying to master so you can master them, and write about them and continuously master your craft and create those new mental connections. So what I do here on my favorite YouTube accounts is you can go to videos, and then you go to sort by most popular, and now you have great content ideas. Like what you, geez, well, I'm sorry kids that are watching this, but I guess that's popular, but okay. So what you can do is take these, and you know they're going to do well because they've already done well. And so what you can do is you can take how to master and control your emotions. You can start writing about it. You can write some tweets about it. You can put it into, you can watch this one and write down the structure of like how he explains how to master and control your emotions. You can write down steps. And in short, these are also good headlines. Like if you were to just straight up take these, make them your own, add a bit to them, maybe 5 steps to mastering and controlling your emotions or something like that, right? Where the headlines are one of the most important parts of your actual writing. And what you can do here is if you look through other ones, just go through here and just start generating ideas on things that you would like to talk about. How to mew. But you can see like that's a pretty attention-grabbing headline. So I love Elijah, but he's not very good at marketing. Sorry, bro. Okay, so Joe Delaney's a good one. He's more fitness, but you just go to most popular. And one thing that I've done is I just screenshot these on my phone. I go to most popular on my phone and I screenshot like the top 8 or whatever showing, just so I'm exposed to like ideas that I know are going to perform well. And I save that in an album in my photos on my phone. And same thing with Nathaniel Drew. This is probably the most relevant and has given me some of the best ideas for people feeling behind in life. Right? That's a great headline that always works. Could do a thread for introverts. He does a lot of the I did this for 30 days. Here's what happened. But it's just good to listen through these and gather good ideas and understand why the video performed well, right? Now, we have a huge process here, and you're only using these as starting points, as ideas, and the rest is up to you to create and use creativity to go about creating a solution or putting together a newsletter. So I just want to show you like these few things, because I get so many of my ideas just from watching like top performing content from other people. Like if you want top performing content, it only makes sense to study top performing content and try to understand why it does well. And by doing that, over time, your brain becomes conditioned to start to think in terms of high performing content, right? So that was just a quick tip. This probably went on longer than it did, but in short, spend a lot of your time with longer form content. Like tweets are great for coming up with like just good tweets on the fly. But if you really want to add to your creativity, you need to expose yourself to more long form content and get those insights that are in the in-between that not many people are talking about or wouldn't do too well on Twitter itself or on social media. They may not be the most high engaging topics, but they may be anecdotes, quotes, other things that you can use to come up with better, unique perspectives for high engaging content and to just make your newsletters better. So that's what I have to say. Use this. Thanks for watching.